me just tell you a little bit about Christine, because Steve and I had just wallpapered it. Christine is the action.
We knew that.
No pressure.
And that's why I think it'll make, no matter what comes out of the meeting,
Sure.
having the input that Christine can give you on this project would be hugely beneficial. So
That's why we asked you to get some.
yeah, you didn't want to see me. I know you wanted to see Christine, but
So, well, that's great. Again, we appreciate it. I sent you a list of topics just so you'd be prepared. So I have hard copies here. You pass these around, anyone who doesn't have it. And I propose that we just run through this list.
We're gonna do the minutes first and then go to that?
I guess we
I
could.
think I have a copy.
I guess that would be fast enough. If we just approve, review and approve the minutes. Please bear with us for a minute. These are our minutes from the last meeting.
Okay, I'd like to make a motion that approve the minutes of the last meeting of the 8th of January 2020.
Second?
22nd, actually.
22nd?
Last meeting, yeah.
I heard a
Second.
second.
All those in favor, please say aye. Aye.
Okay, that was good. Now we'll go on to the discussion items, and again, we'll run through this list. I want to keep it open dialogue. Our questions may take us off into the weeds, which is fine. And these questions are in no particular order. So what we would be interested in is some of the dredging plans for the other towns on the Cape to see competition for resources, be it equipment, manpower, whatever. So any knowledge you have about who's doing what, particularly starting this year. We're supposed to start the channel dredging. The Corps of Engineers is supposed to start the channel October 1st. So well, whatever you know about 2020, and then we can move into 2021.
is the Army Corps doing the channel?
Yes.
Oh, good.
Yes.
Good for you.
Now, when we say the Army Corps doing the channel, I assume they will subcontract it out. I don't have experience up here recent with the Corps. I assume they don't bring their own equipment, that they would sub it out.
Out of curiosity, just kind of getting up to
Sure.
speed on your project, I am aware there is a federal component. Obviously, we're talking about the Army Corps.
Yeah.
Are you aware? Is it a mechanical dredging project with offshore disposal? Is it a hydraulic dredging?
No, it's mechanical with a disposal site out in the bay.
At Cape Cod Bay.
It's black mayonnaise, as
Yep.
we refer to it.
Right.
Affectionately refer to it.
Our permit mandates that for all dredging. We can't use a hydraulic dredge at this
You
point.
cannot use a hydraulic.
At this
dredging.
point,
Okay.
that's correct.
Okay.
Right.
That's through your permitting.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
And that's the same for your portion of the project?
Yes,
as
it
well,
is.
right?
Yes.
That's all mail.
Yes.
Yep.
So not compatible or conducive to beach nourishment. We're not talking sandy material, but we are talking permitted materials, all of which can go to Cape Cod Bay.
Correct.
Okay.
And the possibility that material could be used for marsh restoration. It is consistent and conducive for that, because
Okay.
it's not a sandy material.
Do your permits allow
No.
for that?
In
So that
fact,
would be another
It's
tentacle
something,
to your permit?
it's something that's never been talked about in general, but there are
Okay.
two marsh restoration projects in the being considered in the town.
Okay.
And if not now, the problem is we've got two multi-million-dollar projects going on. So the Herring River restoration, about maybe $60 or $75 million. Mayo Creek restoration would be, multi-million. And obviously the harbor dredging at, something that looks like 20. And so these projects never tend to line up with each other to be able to get, the permits for one at the same time as the other, so that you could actually have these things mesh. But there has been interest on the part of some of the folks involved in the marsh restoration projects, because they do need material because of the subsidence of the marsh itself.
Right.
So, and this material would be compatible and suitable for that.
So you'd have to change your permit twice in that case, right? You'd have to change it to
It's-
hydraulic and...
Is
No,
the-
it wouldn't be hydraulic, it would still have to be mechanical.
So the marsh is not in close proximity to where you're dredging? So
Well, it's within,
guess my
one of
question-
them is adjacent.
Oh, okay. So you could theoretically pump it to the marsh hydraulically?
As a practical matter, if we were to do this, should we consider that the material we would use for this, if we get properly permitted, would be from our phase, rather than delay the channel and get wrapped around the axle with permits? Should we focus on what we'd be dredging in 2021 and 2022?
Yeah, I think you gotta look at the timeline and the expedience of it,
Yeah.
because
Yeah,
this stuff has been documented as how deep it is and how fast. We don't even have back yet the information on the total quantity we have to dredge out, so it'd be nice if you could say they all ran on a similar timeline, but it's driven by the fact of where we are and how long it's gonna take to remove this.
It sounds like you have a lot of material too, so I think you could probably stage it in such a way that,
Yeah.
you know, year 3, you do mass restoration.
Perhaps
of
you
the
could
hydro-
line up
You know,
with
so you're
hydro.
not like slowing one up to get to the other. I mean, from looking at what I've seen from some of the data you guys sent to us, it looks like there's a pretty decent amount of, without the, you know, final numbers coming in, it looks like there's a lot of materials that have to be moved.
And traditionally with a federal project, again, I apologize, I don't know a lot of the intricacies of your project, but typically the Army Corps will come in and do the project on the least cost option. And if they're doing something above and beyond, for instance, if you wanted to use it for marsh restoration, that would be something that the non-federal entity would have to pay the differential. So
Could go the other way.
yeah, it would be the other
It
way,
would- it would
because
go
in
the
this
other
case,
way.
you're taking material from the location, moving it into a marsh that's adjacent, rather than having to barge it out to the disposal site. So there could be cost savings.
So, but the core permit right now is not conducive to any of that. So am I hearing that you're willing to let the Corps come in, do their thing, and then you folks have your project, so to speak, that would follow in subsequent years, and that's where the marsh restoration opportunity may
May
present itself?
make
So
some
that's
sense.
the way I see it.
Okay,
As far as
okay.
timeline
Yeah.
is.
I would think if we use any of it from marsh restoration, it'd probably be during the maintenance dredging phase, so that we don't slow things down.
Yeah.
Because we haven't applied, to the best of my knowledge, for any of this. I mean, I'm not
Yeah,
opposed to
no,
anything,
no,
don't get me wrong. But I mean, what's in the mechanism we need to stay with, in my opinion, because we've been years trying to keep, and we've had many ideas, so I mean, we still all have many ideas, but let's go with what is basically,
Exactly.
what's basically been permitted.
And your permits are on the clock right now, in all
Yes.
fairness.
Yes,
So-
exactly, we have to
so
switch
don't lose
into
sight of
other
that.
timelines.
Right, right.
I have a question for, I don't know where this is going, but I have a question for, my opinion is if we don't do much, any marsh restoration, we have no use for the county because of the mechanics of what you have.
That's right.
I'm not saying that as a negative, but,
No,
Yeah,
so
that's
my,
what I was
my
asking.
question is, I'm gonna get right to my points, if I may. Have you looked at clamshell dredge? Do you not have money for it? Do you not have work for it? Why don't you have one?
we don't have one because we don't have to work for it right now, I
So-
would say. But let me stop right there, because your first question says, where are you right now
Okay.
in the mix and match? We're pretty booked up.
Mhm.
Christine was hired in part to stop the bleeding from a couple of bad years where we were running bad equipment and we were falling behind constantly. That was the first part of Christine's role. When Forth came in, they were, as Christine likes to say, we were here to triage. And that part's over now. We've got plenty of equipment. We've got 3 dredges. We've got
They're all hydraulic?
Yep.
Yeah.
We've got another push boat coming in. We do have access to a clamshell in Plymouth if we need it. But the next phase of Christine's role is to do a 5-year business plan, to look at all the towns and what those dredge projects are gonna be, and figure out whether or not we can do them, and if we can do them, what equipment we need to purchase.
Do any of the towns have windows other than October 1st through December 31st?
It depends on the project and the
Yeah.
location of the project. Everybody has time of year restrictions on dredging.
Yeah.
In a kind of a general broad brush, you're looking at not being able to dredge much more earlier than, say, mid-September at the earliest.
Right, okay.
And predominantly, most of the Cape and islands have to complete dredging around January 15th, January 31st. There are some approach channels, open water areas that don't have those time of year restrictions. So they're allowed to dredge into the spring. But traditionally, those time of years affect everybody's dredging projects.
okay.
Right.
So overall, it's a fairly small window.
It's a very small window, and it gets smaller. They're getting smaller and smaller because of the fisheries component to the permitting review process and the protection of the species that are out there. And with Cape Cod Bay, an interesting part about Cape Cod Bay disposal site, is that disposal site is only open through December 31st because of the Endangered Species Act right whale protection. So you're able to dredge, say, September to, say, February 1st. But if you're going offshore, you lost half your dredge window because the disposal site closes December 31st. So
I
you have
thought
to
I saw there's a provision for a small extension on that window.
Traditionally, that's through the purview of the Army Corps of Engineers, and
Right.
that has to also be vetted through all of the joint agencies that are
Right.
part, including National Marine Fisheries and the state fisheries. They have been less likely to grant those over time. It's becoming less and less likely to get more time. I can't say you couldn't get it, but it's not encouraged, and it seems like a very risky thing to depend upon. And if you do get an extension, it may be a week or two.
Right.
But those are things that are so undefined. It really is a case-by-case basis, defensibility of why you didn't finish your job when you knew the disposal site was closing on December 31st. There's a lot of factors.
But some things like maybe weather
Yeah.
might affect.
Weather can be.
You lost a few days
Weather can
in
be,
order to
yeah.
complete it before you move the equipment away.
And in all fairness, I would like to say there's a very consistent review process that makes that decision, but it's not as consistent as you would like it to be. So there's a lot of factors that have to be considered when you're going that route of getting time of year extensions, whether it be for dredging or for the disposal site.
And then we also have to be aware of maintenance dredging, particularly if we go for money from the state of Massachusetts. So that takes us after we do our initial dredging of all the areas that we have assigned for the marinas. So that, you're saying that could hurt in terms of the windows being reduced?
No, the type, so I guess what I'm hearing is you have areas that haven't been dredged before, would be improvement dredge areas, and then you have
No,
maintenance
once we
dredging?
do the initial dredging of our marina,
Okay,
in 2021 we want to start,
yep,
that we're going to have to follow up year after year after year, or every 2 years or every 3 years. And if you're saying this possibility, this window can be shrinking in terms of the disposal site, that's a factor to it.
I wouldn't go on record, since apparently we are, as saying that window is going to shrink for the offshore disposal site at Cape Cod Bay. That traditionally has been December 31st because of the right whale. That has been steady. That has not changed. When I talk about the other time of years for other fish species associated with the dredging component, we've seen those windows change over time. They've gotten a little bit smaller, but as far as Cape Cod Bay has gone, it's always had the right whale restriction.
Oh, so you're talking more about the inter-harbor.
Right, so there's the dredging within the harbor has time of year restrictions based on the species that
Right.
are in the harbor itself. And then you have the disposal site. And because of the right whale Endangered Species Act protection, they're closing that down because of the species migration and spawning that happens as of January 1st. So it's a disposal site restriction, not a dredge restriction.
So if we did restoration, we might parlay a slightly larger window if we weren't going to the disposal site.
Yeah, the disposal site is going to have an impact on your overall dredge
Yes.
window because that usually
Yeah.
cuts it in half, roughly speaking.
Yeah,
Yes,
okay.
yes.
And I wouldn't see that, even if we're using the materials for, I don't think it's possible at this stage anyway, but if we were using those materials for restoration purposes, clearly it would be larger. But the other thing is, and I think this is more salient to the conversation, where the county may be helpful to us, I think, is not, it sounds like not necessarily with our initial dredge projects, but probably more in line with our maintenance dredging aspects.
So going back to Alfred's point, the hydraulic dredge at this point doesn't work for us. Do you have any other equipment that would be functional for us?
But like I said, it depends a lot. We've had the conversation before, Steve and I have, because we've had towns talk to us about dredging some of the bigger ponds. Orleans just talked to us about dredging ponds. They don't have permits, so we don't have the equipment. If suddenly the permits started to show up, we'd have an appetite to buy the equipment to go up and do that kind of dredging.
They would be smaller pieces of equipment
That's
for the ponds, and what would they be? Hydraulic or cutter heads or mechanical?
Yeah, it's just a different type of
Yeah.
material and a different service.
Yeah, it's very different equipment when you're looking at a hydraulic operation versus a mechanical operation.
Sure.
I guess the best way to kind of broad base it is the mechanical operation is pretty much conventional excavation equipment on a
Right.
barge in the water.
Yeah.
Whereas the hydraulic is more of a floating hub that has a cutter head that sucks water and sand material, and that's pumped through a pipeline onto a receiving area, whether it's a beach. If it's sand, you can pump it right on the beach, or in your case, where we're talking about very fine-grained, oozy, black mayonnaise material, you'd have to have some kind of dewatering pit or some mechanism to get the water out of that material so that that dry material then could be taken to the marsh or perhaps an upland area or disposal site. That adds a lot of cost, by the way, when you're looking at dewatering this fine-grained material. But they're very different pieces of equipment, different experience to run the equipment. So they're not necessarily interchangeable when you come with the different types of dredging, hydraulic versus mechanical.
What they did to do it last year, Patriot Marine did it, and they ran 2 barges and 2 tugs all the time because of the December 31st window. And they
Did
were,
Patriot Marine, were they doing the dredging or just the hauling?
I think they were doing the
Yeah.
whole
Right.
project. Yeah.
Right, so they typically in a mechanical operation, you've got the dredge, which is a spud barge that has either a crane or an excavator on top of it. Next to it is your scow, and that's your seafaring unit that you're going to tow out with a tug. So you always have a tug,
Right.
you have the scow, and that goes to and from the disposal site. The bottom opens up, the material discharges, and then the scow comes back and you repeat. The operation that Jack is talking about was kind of a unique operation in that it was an all-in-one dredge. It was small because they had to get inside a small area within the docks where an excavator actually sat on a pocketed scow, and the excavator would put it in the scow, and then the scow would be towed off to the dump site. So it's multiple pieces of equipment that you need for a mechanical operation as opposed to the hydraulic. It really comes down to the dredge. Maybe a booster pump with your pipeline to get it further, but it's really a pipeline in the dredge. It's very different.
How far can you pump before you need a booster pump?
It depends on the dredge, but typically, I'm going to say, and correct me if I'm wrong, with your operation, we're talking greater than 5,000 feet, so up to a mile you can pump without the booster.
So if you go a mile, and then after that, if you put a booster pump on it, how far would it go?
Yeah, it depends primarily on the pump and the material. If
Well,
it's
we'd be
real
gonna,
fine,
it's gonna be mayonnaise.
So I wouldn't even know what that looks like, Christine, would you? Like,
Yeah, it's like mayonnaise in your jar.
No, I mean, like, what it would look like going through the pipe. Like, we'd have to do an actual test on the pump.
It'd
how
be
it
pretty
carries
fluid.
through.
It'd be really fluid. Very,
So
very fluid.
you could probably increase
The
past a
whole-
mile too without the
Well,
booster.
the reason I'm asking is if you're gonna use it for a possibility for marsh restoration, and you can get a mile or 2 out of it, that's probably,
Significant.
yes.
That would just take a little bit more research on our end just to see what it actually does, like how the pump, it doesn't cause a cavitational thing, and you actually have to run it at a lower RPM. Once they get into, like, they call it the sweet spot when they're operating it, they have the pipe like 60% full of the material. It doesn't cavitate, you can crank the RPMs and it just runs, and that's where you get your optimum position on it. But if you get into like a lighter material, you have to idle it down because the pump cavitates because there's too much water in it, and you lose some efficiency, or vice versa, you get too much material and you bog out. So it would have to be something that we'd have to look into with the manufacturers just to see what that mayonnaise piece would do to the pumps and how it actually, the operational wise, how it would run. But best guesstimate would be.
How do you deter artifacts or rocks?
You
Or
can
old
put
anchors and
screens.
things like that going into
You can
it?
put screens into
Yeah.
that,
They
yeah.
have, like,
And then
on
you
the
can pump it out?
Yeah, on the front of the cutter head, we have a couple of rock bars, so it kind of keeps the bigger pieces away, and then pretty much like a rock up to about 6 inches will go right through everything. And then after that, you run into issues of jamming the pipe and whatnot. But on the bottom of the cutter head board, and the suction part comes in, we have a couple, it's just rebar that goes across it to block bigger material from going in to jam up your pumps, your impellers and your pumps.
To make a determination though, would you have to do a lab test or just look at the pump curve from the manufacturer?
I think you can do it just with the pump curve.
Yeah, okay.
A lab test would probably work, just some weighted material,
Well,
but I think just the
pump curve, yeah.
pump curve would be the best way to judge that.
Okay.
A lot of the, we have the new sand shifter that's been in, we had some mechanical issues with it last year. We're hoping to get about 5,500 feet out of it, but we haven't had a chance to test it in the material. So actually our next job we're going to is Mashpee, and we're lining up on that with a maximum amount of pipe in the envision that we can pump it all the way, but we know that we can cut it off to keep the job fluid and running. But there are also some window opportunities. When you're running that far of a pipe, you lose productivity on the front end, so sometimes it's better to introduce the booster pump, just so you can get the job done in a 15-day window rather than a 30-day window. So that's part of the curve of the pump on what you want to do there. So if you're at your maximum capacity of say 5,000 feet, and it's going to take you 30 days, but if you put a booster in line and it takes you 15 days with these time of year restrictions, it makes sense to bring the booster in at that point. So it's all part of the curve and kind of factoring in the schedule.
For capacity, yeah,
Yep.
okay.
So Christine, what do you see in the market today per cubic foot? What's the range for dredging a cubic foot of this material into and dumping out at the site?
For pumping?
Cost. No,
Cost.
I think
Oh,
the question
cost.
is,
Dollar cost per
ballpark
cubic
per
foot.
cubic yard.
Cubic yard?
It depends on the methodology. So what methodology are you asking about?
Well, mechanical.
Hydraulic or mechanical?
No, mechanical, which we envision not to be a clamshell, but an excavator.
So I do have some things to hand out here, just on some rough ideas of ballpark costs. I thought it might be helpful if you folks want to. I didn't know how many people were going to be here,
That's
so I
okay.
apologize. I'm just going to snag one so I know what I'm talking about.
Dennis's sewer job was just relatively, compared to your job, it was a small job. It was about $4.5 million to do.
So just looking here, just the pictures, you can see the difference of the two operations, just to give you an idea of, you know, the spud barge. This has a crane with an environmental bucket, and right next to it you can see the dump scow with the pockets. That's what your mechanical operation looks like, minus the tug.
Sure.
On the right-hand side of the page, that is a hydraulic dredge. Much simpler looking, very quiet.
That's 'cause you don't show
Don't even know it's there
that's 'cause you don't
sometimes.
show the 5,000 feet of
Right,
discharge.
but you can see at the back the pipeline coming out of
Yeah,
the back, but it's
yeah.
just very different from an
Right.
operational standpoint. What we've been seeing, because a lot of the work that we do outside of the county is a private contractor, and projects within the state of Massachusetts over I would say the last 5 years, what we're seeing for a mobilization and demobilization cost, and that's something that typically a contractor is going to charge you on a lump sum basis.
Yeah.
That's to get your equipment there
And back.
and back. Yep, set up. They have to do intermediate surveys, their bonds, all of these things outside of the physical dredging and offshore towing and dumping is in that cost. What we're seeing is a range somewhere between $250,000 and $350,000 an event. And the reason I say event is sometimes these are multi-year projects. So
Every mob and demob is
correct,
350, yeah,
correct.
understood.
And I use this very broad-based from what we're seeing, because one of the things you will find is these guys are savvy, and you know you may have a conversation with a contractor, and you know he can say, "Well, I'm just going to charge you $20 a cubic yard," but make no mistake, his mob and demob is going to make up for that. So there's always a game that these guys are playing to get a balance between the equipment, mobilization and demobilization, as well as the actual labor costs involved in digging, towing, and dumping. So that's why under the mechanical dredging, I did give an unconfined offshore disposal per cubic yard cost. We're seeing somewhere between $40 and $60 a cubic yard. Another thing that can impact the numbers that you would be seeing when you go out to bid, it depends how busy contractors are.
Yeah.
If there's a lot of competition out there, if there's no competition out there.
I wanted to ask you, in addition to, say, Patriot Marine, who else do you see working in the area?
So I also
should I
brought-
hold that question?
No. So I came prepared, only one. I've got lists of local mechanical, and I also have lists of hydraulic dredging contractors for you guys. You'll see that the hydraulic list is a little more widespread. There's not as many contractors that hydraulically dredge in Massachusetts per se. A lot of it has to do with the majority of the hydraulic operations are done by the county on the Cape because of the nature of the sand. So there's not a lot of hydraulic dredging that you'll see South Shore, North Shore, Boston area. People are mechanically dredging. They don't have the luxury of having nice clean sand to put on their beach, and hydraulic isn't their means and methods, doesn't work up there. So the list that I've provided are contractors that mostly local, that we've worked with all of them on various projects throughout the state of Massachusetts, Cape Cod, islands, and you can take a look at that. But from a hydraulic standpoint, again, you'll definitely notice that they're, you know, New York and Texas, they're kind of out there and out and about.
There's one in Harwich,
Who is that?
or
Hydraulic.
Oh, Robert Auer. So Robert Auer is a local civil site guy, and we've worked with Robert Auer on dredging and hydraulic dredging projects, most recently in the town of Barnstable back in 2013. We dredged the inner harbor of East Bay down to the boat ramp. That was mayonnaise, black mayonnaise, as you guys described, very similar
Yeah.
material. Robert Hour doesn't have a hydraulic dredge. They subbed out the hydraulic. They were the general contractor, and Interspace is also on that list. We worked with Interspace.
Oh, so then they're like an in-between us and a dredging company.
Right. Well, in this
Who owns the equipment?
in this
So
partic-
they have to put their markup on.
So in this particular case, Robert Arrow was the local contractor. For this job, it was actually done with geotubes, which you have to hydraulically pump. You're not pumping on a beach, it's the black mayonnaise. That material is treated with polymers to separate the water from the fine grain material. And then it's pumped into these big, long socks. And then they're stacked on top of each other because there's a very limited area to dewater. If you dewater without treating or stacking, you need acres when you have tens and thousands.
What size are you talking about for the socks?
What's that?
What size are you talking for, just approximately for the
Oh
socks?
gosh, I don't remember the size, but they were, I don't know, 70 feet long.
Sure.
I mean, they were massive.
Yeah.
Is that how New Bedford's doing theirs? Well, they had to stop because they ran out of money, but
No, very different operation.
they were taking the water out, I know that.
Dewatering is associated with a lot of hydraulic dredging, not necessarily a mechanical that's going offshore. Nobody cares what the water is when it's in the scow, it just goes
Right,
offshore, it
right,
stays in the water.
right.
The minute that material has to get on land, water becomes a problem in the sediment, you have to dewater it. But to just finish on, Robert Hour was a general contractor, but they had to build. So there's a lot of site development and preparation for the geotubes to actually come in and set up the treatment center. And then once the material dewaters, the material actually was confined by like a jersey barrier liner system. The water would seep out of the bags. It was clean and the water returned back into the harbor. And then I think it took us maybe 2 months. Then they ripped open the bags and it was dry as dry can be. And then they had to haul it to the placement site. It was an upland site in Dennis. So there was kind of that civil site component that Robert Hour provided, but they did not have the hydraulic dredge capability. So it was a partnership. So that one's a little unusual, but a very successful project.
Christine, so ideally the plan here is that the Army Corps of Engineers has now finished up their work plan to start October 1st of 2020.
Okay.
Then the town and state in the joint effort would be working in October of 2021.
Okay.
What is the likelihood that we can find somebody to do it?
Well-
At one point we asked and they said, oh, we're booked 3 years out in advance type thing, so,
Well, I honestly, you guys are going to have to go out for public bids.
yeah.
I always encourage my clients that I work for with public bids to go out March, April. You want to get out there early because what's happening is everybody is subjected to these time of year restrictions. And people are dredging around here on the same schedule, so to speak. But to get out there early, making sure you have conditions that clearly spell, when your time of dredging can start. We've been encouraging our clients to get out there early because these guys are trying to set their dance card for the
And make an
upcoming
award
season.
by June or earlier even.
I've made awards around there, May, June. In that capacity too, it allows a lot of time that you really do need to sit with the contractor to talk about his operations.
Yeah.
FOATH has a very kind of onerous contractor submittal process. There's a lot of submittals that we ask for the contractor to ensure that his operation is going to go as planned. Also, all of your health and safety and accident prevention and spill prevention, all of these things are submittals that the contractor has to provide us so that we can ensure our clients that the contractor will be operating in the proper manner. So
Insurance requirements. in there,
insurance
I'm sure,
requirements, bond requirements. But if you,
What do you bond? Payment and performance?
both, 100%. We're always 100% both.
And what about indemnification in favor of the town in
Yep.
our case?
Yep, all of those things,
Yeah.
100%. But if you can get somebody under contract in June, that gives you the summer. I'm going to assume you got some moorings that we're going to have to deal with. Moorings are always an interesting angle of figuring out how to manage those. Typically, when we've been involved in public projects with moorings, the town has dealt with the moorings outside of the dredging contract. It doesn't mean that you can't ask the dredging contractor to do that. It really depends on how you manage your moorings, and I'm not sure what that is.
Well over years I
Yeah.
didn't know about
Well,
it.
I assume getting them out of the way. Less of an issue for the channel, I would assume, when we're dredging the channel.
There aren't any more.
Right,
Okay.
right. You get
There-
stuck with all the moorings
A
on your
little
project.
proximity to
Actually, Alfred gets
grants.
stuff more than I do.
Nancy, do we have concerns when we do the channel? Do we have to be aware of any nearby grants?
Yes, there are
As I recall, there's
some
some there.
aquaculture farms, mostly for the federal project. There are aquaculture farms on both sides of the federal channel, and then for the marina, that will go around the marina here. That's
goes around
wild
The entire
shellfishing area.
arena here, or just in,
Like phase
This
two,
is-
the state-town collaboration, around the paved here.
around the paved area?
This is the
On
dock.
both, there's no shellfish farms, there's wild shellfishing all around there.
For the channel, would we have to do anything preemptively, or is it just a question of identifying where they are to the contract and saying, hey, it's a no-fly zone?
We probably ask the farmers to put out strings of buoys marking the ends of their,
Sure.
there's a 25-foot buffer zone at the edge of the farm, so we can decide whether, we want their buoys to go along the edge of their farm or along the 25-foot buffer.
So as far as the federal project, am I correct in understanding that is 100% maintenance dredging that the Corps would be performing, or is there new dredging, improvement dredging areas?
Nothing's improvement.
Okay, so it's all been
yeah,
dredged
it's all-
before,
it's all been
okay.
dredged before.
So that it's 100% Corps funded, it doesn't require much from the town. So they will go out, they will bid the job, they'll procure the job through their Fed Biz Ops or whatever they call it
Yeah.
these days.
And how's their timeline run? So we're in February now, they're supposed to finish their work plan on or about the 20th or
The
say.
work plan is finished.
You sent
an
an email.
email out.
I saw the reference,
Yeah.
was the plan in there itself?
Yes, there's a thing that,
Oh.
as you can see, the work plan here.
Oh, okay.
Click on here.
Okay, so
Who
we,
who is the
Work
project
plans.
manager that you're working with at the Corps, if you know?
Craig Martin?
Oh, okay, sure.
Yeah.
And I have Steve's email address, so I'm gonna email it to Steve. So if any of you would like to see the work plan, you'll be able to see it.
Sure, I can leave my card too.
Okay.
And
Yeah.
that way you'll have my contact information. So to go back to the mooring component, that is something you do have to think about. And by getting a contractor under contract, I often find that when you have your pre-construction meetings to talk about dredging, and you have time to coordinate those mooring removals, you just don't want to wait to the last minute. My experience with the moorings is oftentimes there's a selected few, that are a little angst about having to pull their boats off of moorings a little earlier than they would like. But I remind everybody the importance of being able to start the first day of that dredge window. You don't want to lose that opportunity. So
Can you put LDs on a mooring?
yeah, right. Well, I mean, some of the ideas that we've shared with our clients is, again, having public outreach. This spring, or the spring prior to your dredging event, public meetings are always good. Sending out letters. Again, I'm not quite sure how you manage your moorings. We've had towns prorate the moorings this season. That if you have to take your boats off early, or you get a credit the following year. So there's ways to partner with the mooring users. But that's
Our
always
window
something.
runs October 15th at the end anyways.
Yep. Okay.
Uh,
When do you know what your dredge window is when you can start dredging in the Anna Harbor?
Same October 1st.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So we're
right. So we'd have to have everything out ahead of
Right.
that.
Endangered species like turtles.
Right. So we recently completed a job where that October one was our dredge window. We had 175 moorings, and we had to get them out of the way just to get the equipment into the dredge area. It wasn't
So you
necessarily
have to pull
big.
them sooner, yeah.
So we got out very early in June. We had the contractor come in, identify any moorings that were in his way just for equipment access, and then obviously the ones that were in the area you were dredging, he knew those had to come out. So it was an important piece to have the contractor at the table to help those coordination efforts, and that's why I encourage just kind of getting out early on both fronts. And I don't know if you have local capabilities to store the moorings or.
Most of the moorings are private out there.
Okay.
So there's basically 2 companies in town that deal with them.
Okay. And are there blocks?
No, mushrooms.
Mushrooms. Okay. But not helicals.
Nope.
Okay. Yep. So again, these are all lessons learned over many years.
Going back to the bid cycle, do you typically have a pre-bid meeting, kickoff
Yes.
meeting with all the contractors present?
Yes. I mean, in the past, we leave that as not a mandatory requirement.
Right.
But it's good to just kind of see who your audience is and get them at the table and let them ask questions because it can affect their
Yeah.
their bids.
I know that's part of that too, is the contract, there's a county acting as a contract I've gone to the pre-bid meeting for Bonsall the last 2 years, and it was very helpful just to get all on the same page 2 months before you even get out there, where you know what they're capable of, and even for using same resources, like we need to unload a 500-pound anchor off one of our boats, they had an excavator, so they're willing to lift it off for us. So in turn saved us about 15 grand of having a private contractor come out there. So when you get that all in like one room, iron that out a month or two ahead of time, it'll save you money in the long run.
Almost like a pre-qual meeting?
Yeah.
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 But I mean, it was very helpful in Bonsall. There was, made the connection early, started communicating early. We had some weather that came up on us, and we were able to help each other out, basically to hide the gear. And it saved, the contractor and the county a ton of money of, trying to pool different resources to come in. We were able to pull the resources together, and like we saved them a few times out there.
There really is never enough time when you start. I mean, this goes really fast, and as much as you think, oh, we'll get out in March and we have plenty of time for October, trust me, all of a sudden everybody's like, oh my God, like we still have 100 moorings to pull, we only have 2 weeks left. Like it really comes quick, and lessons learned in doing this is getting out in the spring, the public outreach component, because there are going to be a lot of people that are affected, and if you share this information open and upfront in a timely manner and try to make it less impactful, let them be part of the process, let them ask the questions, let them have time to really understand, because it's complicated stuff, and the harder part is nobody can see anything that you're doing. It's all under the water, so there's like that devalued, you don't get the big ribbon cutting with the big new shiny toy. It's, oh, what'd you do? It's all under the water. So if you can get out there early, that's I think one of the most important things that we try to do with our public projects and for our public clients, because there's just never enough time on that coordination end.
So Christine, if you've ever had an issue where one of the accounts, it would be a town or something that's dredging, the federal government comes in to do the channel, and they're subcontracting, I believe, because they have 61 pages of tasks they got across the U.S. that they subcontract to a dredge company. They don't use any of their particular dredge, like this large one in Chatham,
Yeah,
to do this.
that's not the right piece of equipment that
Right.
you guys need. That's the
But
current time, right?
it sounds like they would subcontract. So if they they have their own dredge that could
No,
come in?
so the federal government doesn't have their own dredge. I think they might have 3 federal dredges left because of the competition in the private industry. And you saw one out of Chatham, the Currituck, that's their hopper dredge. That's a hydraulic type of operation that sucks it into the belly. Then they move it and they discharge it at a nearshore area to allow it to kind of migrate back on the beach. It's a very different piece of equipment. I think they have another Currituck-like vessel, a little bit bigger. But as far as I know, the Army Corps does not have a mechanical dredging operation, so they will go out for public bid, just like you would. It will likely be similar contractors. They may have pre-qualifications. Federal government work may have pre-qualifications.
So the item I want to bring up is since they're doing that, in the likelihood, let's say if we had another mild winter like we're having, where the fall was mild, except for they had a couple storms in December, but would there be a possibility, have you ever heard, where the town like Wellfleet could take on that same contractor, dredge company, and then use it to clear a way into our ramps, something like that?
So we call it piggyback dredging. That's kind of what it's called, and where the federal government would go out to bid, and you could partner and utilize that contractor. But I think you need to look at your procurement process internally and to figure out if that's allowed. I have seen that done when the contractor's on site, and if there's a non-federal dredging that needs to be done and is authorized, there could be that opportunity. But that really is an issue for procurement process and public bid. And I would recommend you talk to your town council to figure out if there's a partnering opportunity for that. But we have seen that before. There is value there if the dredge is coming in on the federal government
Yeah, you only
side.
have one in and out.
Well, think about it. If through the Army Corps contract, they're going to have the mob and demob, so that's paid under the federal contract.
Right.
So you would enter into a mirrored agreement, likely negating that mob and demob because the contractor's already on site. So you're kind of looking at a per cubic yard dredge and disposal costs, and there's economic value there. If you're thinking about doing that, I would recommend talk to Craig Martin about that opportunity, because the Corps has done that in the past on projects I've worked on with them.
For a
What are they,
project-
do you know when the feds are going out to bid? Are they
No, that's
just-
what I was gonna ask about the timeline. They've got the work plan now, so they need to be going out in March. We were gonna have a meeting with Craig once the work plan, so we will need to schedule that. But if you figure they go out presumably in March to be ready in October, is that?
I can't speak on the Corps' behalf, but I'm sure Craig will be able to outline
Oh, yeah, no.
a bid schedule.
I was asking more historically than procedurally, but yeah.
Yeah, I think it definitely depends how busy they are, what they got going, who the project manager is. But they have a very defined process in which they have to do their plan by, and that takes a very defined period of time. So I would just check in with him, and I'm sure that schedule allows them the time they need to do all the things that we were just talking about.
Right.
But it's on the Army Corps clock.
So for our portion of it and the work that you guys have done, you've prepared the RFP, I assume, in the name of Barnstable County, and when you award the contracts, whose paper is it on? Is it the county paper?
So the county's a little bit different in the sense that the county enters into contracts with each of the towns within the county to do the hydraulic
We
dredging.
don't have to procure.
It's not a procurement process.
It's an intermunicipal agreement.
Okay.
There's no going out to bid. It's basically you have a standard agreement, how many cubic yards, what's the cost, and you go, you do it. And it's a very simplified process because of that interagency agreement that was set up initially for the county. But without the county process, you are looking at a full-fledged bid solicitation, bid package out on the street in accordance with Mass General Law procurement processes in any town.
Is there anything in the county process that you just described that we can utilize?
It would only be if you were using us as an end contractor.
Oh, okay.
But I think it would, just from the procurement end of it, just kind of listening in, like if you piggybacked with your bid package on the back end of it and solicited the same people that bid on the Army Corps job, you might be able to have that net savings. Even if you can't jump on the contract with the Army Corps, you might be able to, if you get it packaged together at the end, and then kind of like who bid on it, you could just blast them an email like, hey, we're doing the same project, same area, like same time frame. If you might be able to have some parallels there.
Yeah, talk to Craig about it. The
Yes.
Corps does that a lot, and I've been involved in those. But it's really just talking with them to find out the best way to do that. Now, I don't know, what is the volume that the Army Corps will be dredging for you? Does anyone
We said
know?
300 something.
Yep,
300,000
Yeah, total.
cubic yards.
in one dredge season? Are they just doing this in one season? 'Cause, I mean, that's
Oh, the Army
plan.
Corps?
Yeah.
We don't know what they're,
Usually.
we don't have them.
Okay.
They've done it before.
I mean, that's a lot of cubic
Yeah, it
yards.
is.
That's big equipment.
That's for our,
Yeah.
that's our,
That's huge.
That's huge, and given the window that you have, there may not be time for you to piggyback because they've got to get their job done
oh, we're
first.
only
Usually-
talking a way for a safety purpose to get out to the federal channel from our ramp, because that area is impacted by a lot of this
Right.
mayonnaise or custard.
Meaning a small incremental
Right,
piece.
and it's
that
a
we
safety
wanna
issue
go
in
out
the
onto, yeah.
wintertime for the harbor master people to get out
Right.
through there.
Right. I think what you'll have to talk to Craig about, if you have such a significant volume, which is a significant volume, the way it has always worked in the past with a piggyback opportunity, and mind you, it sounds like you're just talking a minimal isolated area of dredging you want for access. Typically, the core project has to be completed before that contractor
Oh, right.
can be given up. And if you have such a large volume, you really got to look at your window. And if Cape Cod Bay is closing on December 31st and they're starting October 1, that's a lot of volume.
I don't think it's 300,000, I think it's 300,000
Total.
for the entire.
Total.
Right.
Okay. But find out what your volume is, and talk to Craig about it. There are opportunities. I've seen them work successfully. It's just they're probably the best people to talk to see how to streamline and what kind of opportunities that could benefit the town, because it sounds like it's a minimal amount of additional dredging, but just to position yourself.
It's nowhere
at the
near as
forefront.
long as the federal channel.
Right. But considering you have a small time frame,
It's 100,000.
100,000.
It's around 100 for the channel,
Okay.
for the federal portion.
That sounds
That's one.
right. And I know Sisu, it was about 80,000-ish. same kind of restrictions. I think October 1 had to be done by December, and they had much smaller scows. I'm sure the Corps will have a larger scow, but it's worth asking that question, because if they can set that up for the opportunity just to get you through that public safety access issue, talk to them about it.
You said you imposed payment performance bond on the RFP. Do you, what about LDs?
That, it depends. That's something we ask our clients if they're interested in going after. One of the kind of unique things about dredging, unlike a standard construction project, is the way
Weather-dependent.
it's weather dependent, but the way we structure our language is the contractor has a start date and an end date, which is usually defined by your dredge window. And the contractor has that amount of time to get the project done under their mobilization and demobilization costs. If they don't finish because of something not weather dependent, then it's on them. Our provisions are they have to come back on their dime the following year with their equipment to finish the job.
So they end up eating
So they're eating a lot of money. So a lot of times
for the remote.
they're removing with all the equipment, and a lot of times we justify that is the LD, because if they're coming back on something that might cost them $250,000
Right. That's,
to do it, some of the LDs are really small. I mean, if we impose them, I've seen them. Maybe the most might be $500 a day, but we haven't. As of late, the LDs don't really seem to have value in a project like this, because the language is written that the contractor is required to come back if he doesn't finish the job on time.
and who has risk of weather?
The risk of weather is part of the contract.
Okay.
The contractor understands he has X amount of days, and he has to make sure he brings the right size barges in, the right size bucket. I mean, these guys can be dredging with a 3 cubic yard bucket or a 25 cubic yard bucket. So it's up, the means and methods are on the contractor to always define, and that's something through a submittal process that they would define their work plan, what the equipment is. Some of these scows can handle 500 cubic yards, some can handle 8,000 cubic yards. So they've got to figure out what equipment they need in order to perform the job, assuming weather, but to complete it within the time of year that you're contracting under.
Does the Army dictate that though? The Army Corps of Engineers dictate the equipment size?
No,
No,
the means and
no,
methods
means
are,
and methods
nope,
are
never,
that,
never,
yeah.
nope.
I just wasn't sure, like, to
Nope.
eliminate, like, you have a 3-yard dumpster with a 20-yard hopper, like, you know,
Well,
just make-
yeah,
Well,
I mean, those
they might
are
cost
things that
it.
you
I just, like, when you start talking, I'm like, wait a minute, like, you wanna make sure they're qualified with equipment coming in, because you don't want the guy to show up with, Tonka toys.
No, and one of the things that we do include in our bid packages is exactly to kind of minimize those bad things from happening is with bids, we require the contractor to submit a list of the proposed equipment that they're gonna be using.
Sure.
So when you look at the bid, you're not just looking at the number, but you're looking at the equipment, and you can generally assess, if he's digging with a teaspoon versus, the right size bucket. So there's ways to kind of gauge that. You are subjected to low bid. I mean, that's part of the public procurement process, and it is difficult to disqualify because there really is no pre-qualification process like you might see. DOT has pre-qual process for roadway work and stuff like that, but marine work doesn't typically have a pre-qual process. So your low bid is usually who they
So
want goes to.
inadequate equipment selection could be a risk.
It is.
On behalf of the low bidder. That's where the risk is, or one of the risks is.
Showing up late.
Now, under the mass procurement, though, do you have to be DCAM certified? Because
No.
of the amount of number it is.
No, because it's that's for vertical
Touching,
construction.
yeah, right.
This is horizontal construction, so it doesn't apply.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear your question. Do you have to be what?
No, DCAM, Department of Asset,
Oh, okay.
Capital
No.
Asset Management.
Dredging isn't under vertical construction laws where you would need to have that. I think it's chapter 149.
Yeah.
So we're all horizontal construction, so that doesn't apply.
In order, we talked about this idea of piggybacking. Is 100,000 cubic yards doable in a season? So in other words, if we were going to piggyback another, let's say 25, is that reasonable?
Another reason to start the first day of your dredge window.
Get
your
we
moorings
can start
out.
with that, get your moorings out so it doesn't
That's kind of
delay.
what
There's really good reasons why you want to start that first day.
Yeah, because we're talking about the channel all the way into the ramp, and so the ramp portion, from the ramp to the federal channel is what we're piggybacking.
Right. So again, I would
Or
recommend
piggybacking.
speak with Craig Martin. There's ways to allow for the contractors that are bidding for the federal project to be aware of this opportunity. 100,000 cubic yards that's a lot of volume in a couple of months. So if a contractor is aware of the piggyback opportunity, even though it would be your own contract, it wouldn't be, typically it's not through the core contract, but they may have changed that. But you want to make sure that the contractor is aware that there would be that additional volume, because that's making more money while they're there.
Bigger bucket.
Right. And to that point too, the cubic yard cost, I gave you the 40 to 60 bucks a cubic yard. When you start getting in higher volumes, the price can go down a little bit, because it's a very attractive project, and there's economy just coming with the actual volume that you're digging. You can pay a premium. If you're dredging 5,000 cubic yards, you could be paying 60 bucks a cubic yard, but if you're digging 50,000 cubic yards, if you can see, that kind of reasoning.
The other thing I just want to make mention, you had mentioned that it's been a mild winter. We've lost 45 days this year for dredging already, and it has been a mild winter, but the wind's been really killing us on the hydraulic edge side. We've been getting blown out, like random days it's gusting over 30 and we can't operate. So the weather window, like sitting in my office, I'm like, it's nice out, what are you talking about? And then you open the door and the wind's flying by, then you can't operate. So the weather window really does factor in a lot on the days that you can run. With their equipment, obviously it'd be more seaworthy than what we have, but
It's
just
still
to
same
keep it in the back
impacts.
of your head that like it looks nice out your office window, and I'm guilty of it all the time. They'll call me, I'm like, what are you talking about? You're not working. You open the door blows open. Now I know why you're not working. But there's this winter's been mild, like no snow, knock on wood. But we've lost 45 days, at least 45 days this winter,
Yeah.
from October 1st till now.
And to that point, that's on a hydraulic dredging operation. You're towing this out to the dump site, and those swells come in. You might build a dredge, you might be protected where you're dredging, but you can't get the dump scow out. So you've got a dump scow that just sits there, and they can't dredge. So there's that interconnected piece of, you might be able to dredge, and like Steve said, you look out your window, it's perfectly calm here, but they can't get the scow out to dump. So those are all kinds of things that can slow down the process outside of icing and things like that. With the outer channel, there's probably not a lot of icing, but I think as you get into your areas, there's probably a high likelihood that you could have some icing in that inner harbor area. But the winds, I know for Boston Harbor's ongoing dredging, the contractors out there we're working with on other projects as well, and they've been hit really hard with the winds getting offshore with those scows as
Who's
well.
the contractor up there?
Great Lakes, Dock and Dredging,
yeah.
and Cashman is also working on that. We're also working with Great Lakes down in Quonset, down in Rhode Island. I don't know if you know that area at all. Big jobs.
The last time they dredged, they had 3 scows, and they had to anchor them in the harbor down the 10 can because of the weather most of
Can't
the
get them
time.
out.
Do you recall what size scows they were?
No, it was a 16-yard bucket. Cashman had one. It was good size.
Yeah.
But my question is more to the county if we're going to do maintenance dredging, because we're going to get through this mechanism. These are great questions, don't get me wrong. Most of this stuff is going to go by itself because the Corps is going to do it. It has in the past. The moorings and that stuff, we've done this before, multiple times. I'm back to the fact that when we get this all done, we have no way of keeping up with this. And that's why I asked originally, what it would take for the county. You said the county's very busy, I understand that.
Yeah.
But if the county was to have another dredge, would they be able to staff that?
Yep.
Okay.
We think so.
Well, this
We're
is the-
actually,
But within the issue that we have is if you're getting like to a clamshell or
Yes.
like a scour, that's totally different from the operation that we have now. So to answer your question, we have so much work now with hydraulic dredging, we're not interested in getting the clamshell at this point, but we are developing a 5-year plan, so there might be something down the road. But the economy of scale for us is to get the guys trained and to keep the guys around on a hydraulic dredge has been challenging enough. So we'd have to hire essentially a different crew altogether to run the mechanical dredging, and I don't know what that
Wouldn't it be
looks
easy?
like right
Wouldn't
now.
that be easy to find a crew to do that, where it's not as high tech compared to what?
The other thing I think we'd run into, like right now, all our boats are size that you don't need your captain license and things of that nature. We're all underneath 28 feet for the push boats, and the barges don't need captain license on. So I just don't know what the appetite is, or with the what's out there for resources as far as hiring for the people. For the general operation of the excavator on a scow, yeah, you can hire you know, any, not to downplay, but like a DPW worker that uses an excavator, you could train them to use it.
And
It's
we
a
had
GPS bar.
considered that. I
Yeah.
know Dennis had instead of a clamshell because
But
an
I think
excavator is much more forgiving.
I think where you run into the liability and kind of risk factor is going offshore with the scow and having, you know, the proper captain and the proper boat to push that out there. We have just small push boats, you know, 200 horsepower push boats that we just kind of creep around with. If we have to go, like from Fairhaven to Truro, we went this year, we just hired someone to come in and tow it for us, and we just brought our boats down and around by ourselves.
Who'd
but
you
when
hire?
when
Who did
spend-
you hire? Do you recall?
To be honest with you, I don't. We tried like 3 people and they said they were too busy. We found someone out, I think it was out of Rhode Island. I
Yeah.
figured Eagle rings a bell, but I don't hold me to that. But they, you know, they came, hooked it up, dropped it off for us, we met them there.
Right.
But right now we're trying to, the county's kind of going through some growing pains now that we essentially had 2 operational dredges that we try to keep running at all times, and we have 1 spare because of the mechanical issues that we had last year. The older dredge, the codfish, is 20 plus years old, and it's coming close to its end of life. So we're using that as a spare, and we're trying to just piggyback and keep these jobs going. But to go to another totally different position on dredging, I don't think we're going to be there in the next couple of years.
So,
But to Alfred's point, you really need a track of
That's a key thing to us.
To go back to your question, because it's a very fair question. The way we work the dredge program is it's an enterprise account. In other words, we have to generate enough money to run it every year. So if we have $1.8 million in contracts, we expect that we're going to do $1.8 million worth of dredging. Therefore, if working through somebody like Christine, if a proposal was made that we were going to do maintenance dredging and we needed a mechanical dredge, a small mechanical dredge to do here, Rock Harbor, maybe some in Chatham, Bourne, if there was enough business to be generated, then Christine could look at it and make a recommendation as to what we need, what we should buy, and yeah, we'd be open to doing that in that particular case. But we'd have to see the permits and the need. I don't think we could do it just for one town because you'd need it every 3 or 4 years probably.
Well, I guess that was my question of when you were pulling all your plans together with your permits, was the dredge frequency assessed on how frequent maintenance would be needed for the project?
I think it's going to be on a 2-year cycle. I mean, there's this debate on this. I think that we haven't taken into consideration, or it's hard to take into consideration, our sugar bowl is full, okay? And it's now up on the platter everywhere. So when we dredge this stuff, we've got a lot of mayonnaise that's going to come back. Where in the past when we dredged, we weren't so full. So that's where one of the conflicts is. We don't know whether or not we've got 2 inches in places or 6 inches, because what's happening now is...
That this area?
no, to the more to the right,
Oh, okay. Okay.
where you are on that plan. But see, what's happening is our shellfish area
Yep.
is now getting silted up. So we've got acres and acres with 4 or 5 inches of mayonnaise in some places. That's going to, in theory, flush back into the bottom, into our sugar bowl. So the question is, the first year, are we going to be all set? The second year, is this stuff going to come back? Predominantly, if we have ice, sometimes it moves it more. So there's not an exact answer to this. Nor is, so my question really was, as a concern, the town of Wellfleet has looked at maybe buying its own dredge. It would be better if we could partner up with somebody.
Yep.
You.
But when we say dredge, we mean excavating equipment. We don't mean
Yeah.
specialized
Right.
No.
dredge.
So when I guess
Probably
the-
track on a barge, I think, has been most of the
But
country.
it's the
Yes.
workers.
Well,
Like you're
there's the
saying,
wor-
it's an issue. This
the workers are-
gives you more job time, but it's also in the
Right.
same window.
But you're also going to have to look at a tug, scows. Like, are those things that you would lease or?
Open to discussion.
Okay,
Yeah.
so
No, this is not. This is.
yeah.
This is the future.
We have a
This is
problem,
the
we're trying to
future.
figure out how to solve it,
Yeah.
and what
The pro-
options are available.
It makes sense to start this now.
Well, the real.
Right.
There's
You're
a,
here.
there's a lot of
Including-
moving pieces to this.
Yes, including,
Tomorrow we're talking to Orleans.
Well, the real problem with this, not to interrupt you, is but the last time we had dredging, we talked about this before it, and we never did anything.
Yeah,
Okay, so if we get back in the same rut,
but now we have a business manager.
you,
I don't have any equipment though.
Well, the
I
other-
can give you my opinion.
The other question though is, and you probably know this better than anybody what other demand is out there. In other words, what opportunity for partnering is there, number one.
Well, that was part of the.
And number
piece that
two is, does it make sense, you've brought up Plymouth, they do have mechanical dredging capability. Does that make sense? I mean, in other words, maybe it's not just the Cape, maybe there's something
Yeah, well,
else.
Steve and I have never taken the ride up to look at it, although we've been invited to. We should. So it is a long arm. It's seldom used.
The last I heard, and I don't want to misspeak, is that they bought the long reach, but they don't have a barge, they don't have a scow, they don't have a
Yeah.
tug. Like they actually have the excavator, and that is it.
Which is probably.
What do you think the reach
speaks
is,
to
30
that.
feet or something?
I-
Depth, 30-foot depth? you
I
think,
don't.
on
Yeah, I
the
don't know what size the long reach was, but I think they bought one piece.
reach? Yeah.
And maybe not fully understanding all of the pieces that are needed to accomplish a mechanical dredging operation.
Sure.
Because it's not just about that excavator.
Right.
If it's on the water, you need the barge. That barge has spuds. You need something to
Scow.
put the sediment in. You need something to tow the sediments. Sometimes you're unloading and putting that on land, so you need trucks. And so it can kind of just get bigger and bigger. But the last I heard, all that was purchased with Plymouth County was just a long range excavator, and I don't think it ever went any further than that. And that was
never been
a
used.
few years back, so I can't.
But then going back to the
It came
demand
from
question,
It came from the
Yeah.
feds, so they can't sell it
Yeah.
to us. But they could make an arrangement.
So that's part
but
of.
coming
our
back to the
bigger
demand on the
picture is-
Cape, I mean, are we unique, or how many other harbors have the conditions that would be similar?
I think because of the sand, the Cape is so unique.
I think.
But this is
No, but I mean-
Robert Orr Company
Yeah.
who
Oh, you mean
did some of
Wolf
it.
unique.
Is
Yeah,
that,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
are they looking, to your
We're
knowledge, would they
unique.
be willing to expand their business to where?
I
they
think
would-
it's economy of scale of what, and that's what it comes down to us. If you're doing it every 2 years, what's the cost gonna be to you for us to actually purchase the equipment? If we're doing it every 2 years and it's 25,000 cubic yards just for throwing out numbers, like we have to charge you $100 a cubic yard to recoup the money for the equipment that was purchased. And that's what it really boils down to, but as we have FOF on board with the county right now, is we're looking at a 5-year for all the towns to see what the actual need is out there. We know without question there's tons of need for hydraulic dredging, so much to the fact that we bought another dredge so we can keep up with it. But now we're trying to solve like the big flame, put that out in front of us, but now with Christine on board, we're gonna be looking at what all the other towns actually have, and then to see if there is a scalability of doing it. And then the other thing is, you guys could have too much sand to do, and we wouldn't be able to do any other town, because you all have the same windows. So
Our
it
current,
comes down to
yeah,
that.
our current siltation estimate, including the federal channel, so the mooring basin plus the federal channel is something on the order of around 15,000 cubic yards a year, per year.
Over what?
Per
area?
year.
But
That's the
Hey.
federal channel and the mooring basin.
That'd be our maintenance level.
So that's our
Right.
maintenance level
15,000
on an,
cubic
that's on an
yards.
annual basis. That's the
How long's
current,
that run?
that's the current estimate for the siltation rate.
And so if
but it's a big area.
If Sassuat needed, if Sassuat wasn't dredged for 50 years, and that's why it cost them so much money. But if they wanted to go to maintenance dredging, if Rock Harbor wanted to go to maintenance dredging, and Barnstable has some needs for maintenance dredging, some of the inner harbors. If there's enough volume, then we have a real conversation.
But all those people are hydraulic.
So what with Christine is,
Well,
the next step is Christine is gonna be sending out a request to all the appointed, I think Dan is the appointed person here, on the so-called dredge advisory panel of the 15 towns. We're gonna be sending out a survey that says, we need to know what your 5-year strategy is. And we'll include something
Yeah, I think
in this vein on that survey.
the information needs to be gathered, and that would be reaching out to all the communities, understanding what they have for dredging needs with a hydraulic dredge, but also the frequency and number of those projects. Like, it's all tied together. When you talk about maintenance dredging, I've done maintenance dredging projects that are done every 25 years. It's all relative to the project area and the movement and the sediment budget that's moving in and out of your particular area. I've also, I mean, you could ask the town of Chatham, they could probably dredge every 3 months because there's such a dynamic system in some of the areas that they're trying to maintain. So you have to look at the number of projects that would require a mechanical operation throughout the county, but then also the volumes and the frequency needs for maintenance dredging of each of those projects. and then collectively you could make that assessment. Most of the maintenance dredging that we do, and it sounds, if I'm hearing correctly, your first maintenance round will probably be the shortest frequency between the original project,
Yes.
but going forward, eventually that time would open up for less frequent, you hope.
Yeah.
I mean, 2 years is a very short window for maintenance dredging, but I can understand where you're coming from in terms of
Well,
you're overloaded.
But if you look at what, we're looking for yardages coming in already, I mean, that's the projected.
And is that from the
Is that-
Army Corps?
GEI.
Okay. And is that based on comparison of
It's not very recent.
It's,
prior?
yeah,
It's not very recent.
Yeah. And again, it's a number.
it's
but
just
I-
a ball, you know.
Right, but I think until the county can actually get a vetted list from each town of projects that wouldn't require a hydraulic operation, what those are, how frequently they need to be dredged, what kind of volumes have been dredged in the past, that's the kind of information that we would need to make that kind of assessment. Does it make sense? Because the purchase of that equipment, the labor that comes attached with it, that labor is, a little dredge window. It's, you're not employing someone year round, so to
Right.
speak. There's a challenge in that capacity, but you need to make the numbers work for a break-even operation for you guys to call it
Well, also
successful.
for them, we could do it.
Right, it might be
Like,
cheaper
we're
to get a
charging
private
you-
contractor in.
yeah.
And then another thought I had, going back to your question specifically about Robert Hour, if you think you have such a short period between the initial dredge and your next round of maintenance dredging, one of the thoughts I would throw out for you guys to think about is entering into almost like a service agreement with a private contractor, going out to bid, getting a guy under contract and saying, over the next 5 years, give us your per cubic yard price, and then you set up a work plan with that guy. As opposed to every time you think you need him, you go out to bid. You could see some savings because these guys are trying to schedule their dance card for a very short period of time every year. So if you did some kind of multi-year service agreement contract, setting up a plan with them over so many years, this is how many cubic yards, they like that assurance that they
Yeah.
have work and they can
Robert
plan.
Orr is a big company, and it's getting bigger and bigger, and they're looking at all kinds of things. Like they did the adjacent town, East Ham's water system,
Right.
and they did an excellent job with it. They're also involved. They're going to be involved in these wastewater projects that Orleans and Harwich and other towns are going to be involved with. So you're right. There's a way we should be able to tie together that if they hire somebody, they train them for multiple types of work, and then maybe pieces of equipment, they buy some of it, and the others they could lease from somebody.
Well, these contractors either own it or they find it, they horse trade all the time.
Yeah.
So
Right.
once you get out into the playground of the private contracting business, if they want to go after a job, they know where they can find the equipment if they don't own it. Whereas when you get into the county, you're gonna, if the numbers can work, you're buying certain pieces of equipment that may not be conducive to everybody's need, but the majority of needs. I think the difference that you have to be careful of what we're talking about here with like a multi-year contract going out to bid, you have to publicly solicit the bids for the public dredging. Aside from if the county had the operation, then it would be through an interagency agreement, so the procurement process isn't required. So it's two different vehicles. But it is something, if a private contractor likes guarantee that they're going to have work for a
Right,
dredge
sure,
season. And I think there's at least the conversation to have is the attractiveness. If you think you're going to have to dredge on that very short period of frequency each year or every other year, they may be more interested in doing because they know they're going to have that work.
I don't think you can go beyond 3 years on a procurement bid like that, can you?
You would have to check. I don't know if that's.
I think it's 3-year max on a.
Is it
contract.
state? I don't know if it differs by town.
No, I think that's by the state procurement.
Okay.
Yeah,
But you
this-
get year one, and so if you go out, you award, you get one, and then you get the next one.
You can do
The
it.
contract.
If you had a 2-year
period
cycle.
can only be 3 years.
Right.
Just double check on that.
But we're after money from the state, so is a lot of people. But the issue is there, if we can't show consistency of doing this dredging, we need to have that tied down as just as well as we have to have it tied down to do this. But Alfred's right, we're pretty much on the way to how we're gonna get that done. But this maintenance piece, because it's so different from the rest of the Cape, we still have to find somebody that we can tie into.
And what might make sense though too, as you're talking about it, is to, as part of our initial RFP, to ask for what would, assume you had to come back in 2 years, add that to this
Yes,
as an option.
Like a bid option or something.
As a
yeah.
bid option to look at, if you were going to do this on a service basis, what would it look like coming from you, the qualified bidder?
I mean,
And
do
if
the
it-
feds have to come back every 2 years or 3 years for their channel too?
No.
No, how often do they, because that's a less
15 years?
15.
2001, something like that, they were here last year. Yeah.
It sounds just intuitively that the maintenance frequency should decrease over time. But you're just overflowing, like you said. So
Well, the maintenance that the feds are doing right now, part of it should have done
they didn't have
10
money.
years ago.
Right, they didn't have money.
Well, it
to
wasn't a
do
big enough project, I don't think either.
Okay.
Because the channel itself comes in as the federal mooring area, which has been full for 5-10 years.
Right.
And the channel still acts accessible.
I mean, the federal funding of navigational projects over the past 15 years has been really tough, and it all came after Katrina. It was like clockwork. When that disaster hit, and these are all congressional ads that have to be approved, navigation took a huge hit unless you're a major port area. So it's been tough for everybody to find any federal dollars, and we've had several clients that just couldn't wait, and they went out and got the money and did the federal job for the federal government. It's unfortunate. It is the way it is.
So you haven't had your mooring area dredged since 57?
I don't know the answer.
No, I think it's 60 something.
Okay.
That's a long time though, still.
But that's behind the cores. So we've been fortunate that our mayonnaise became their mayonnaise.
Eventually they own some of it, right?
Yes.
Yeah,
Because it does slough off.
yeah.
I feel like, go ahead.
Just a quick question, again, not knowing the intricacies of the design. What is the dredge depth? Does it vary based on areas, or how deep are you dredging?
Majority of it's 6 feet.
Below,
With a 2 foot
one
over.
extra foot,
With a 2
yeah,
foot?
7 feet.
Oh,
Was it we one or we were one or we
1
two?
foot.
We're only at 1 now? Okay. Then over dredge.
Just the 1 foot? Because that was a thought that I had, that if you could get that 2 foot over dredge, or deepen your dredge depth a foot, and almost create like a sump capacity for that slough. We've done that in the past when we know we're dealing with some unstable shoreline areas, is to almost dig like a trough-like thing to try to trap some of that stuff. But that would have to be permitted, so I don't want to say that you could just create idea, let's put it down on the list. That would be a permitted requirement, but.
I thought the spec was 2.
Yeah, I thought the spec had 2.
Okay. Typically, at that navigational depth, it's a 1 foot, and that's why I was thinking if you could get that too,
Yeah.
and kind of utilize that as a sump capacity for the sloughing, and that could buy you more time too. Those are things that we've done on
And they probably did that because of the length of time since the last.
Right.
It could have
And
been.
they
yeah.
know there's an
It-
excess
it-
amount of material.
It could also just be on the inner harbor part. I can't recall which one was. I think they may be different.
Through all 3, I think it was the same on all
Was it?
3.
But, I mean, those are just
Shows on the
unique ways
drawing,
to
1
deal.
foot on every one of them.
Okay.
Yeah.
There's
There-
one.
1 foot over dredge.
There it is. Okay.
Yeah.
And sometimes, I mean, the regulators sometimes aren't really keen on those ideas, but, the argument can be made if you can control some of that sloughing and not have to dredge so frequently, that also has value. They don't want you in there digging every year if you can avoid it from an environmental standpoint. So those are things that we've used in the past when we've had unstable areas, just kind of creating that trough-like opportunity for some of that side slope to slough into. You got a
Well, and
lot
the
of
other thing
area.
about the overdredge is everything's there, The
Oh, yeah.
the incremental cost to do that extra foot is
Well, it's
ridiculously
100%.
small.
It's 100% in the template. It's,
Yeah.
yeah,
Mhm.
exactly.
Exactly.
Yep. It's a lot, and I mean those guys are going to chase it because they get paid for it. So
I feel like we covered in one form or another 1 through 8 pretty thoroughly.
Well, that's
very,
good.
very helpful. Let's take a quick
I didn't
look.
know.
Let's take
That's
a quick
good.
look at number 9. And I can't remember if this one came from you or from Skip. About is the county budgeted to provide required maintenance dredging permits for Barnstable County towns?
Again, as it works in an enterprise account, you can spend what you take in. So if the demand is there, we can increase the
Okay.
price.
But right now, we do nothing with permanent.
Yeah,
no, each town is
Each town
responsible
is-
to
Oh,
permit.
okay, so you don't have a dog in the fight for permits,
No.
just strictly the enterprise one,
no.
okay.
What happens is if a town runs into a problem with a toy, Christine will help the town.
Yeah, we've been kind of assisting,
Yeah.
all of the towns out of the gate are required to provide all of the permits up front so that we can actually get the project scheduled.
Right.
We've seen a couple of little hiccups here and there, we've been able to mediate, if we're short on time because of weather, we'll go to the agencies and try to get extensions. And that's really just the first year of us working
Right.
together. But that's traditionally, to get on the list, we need to have the permits that authorize the work.
Okay, and number 10 was one of your,
Well, it's a little bit different than, the question there was, and this is sort of a general question, but the town just made a major purchase of the Hilda Trust, and, you know, there's obviously a lot of, you know, there's a lot of turtle habitat within that particular area. I don't know how much, but there's got to be some. And we've been required as part of our mitigation to include a certain amount of money for, you know, either for the research or whatever, but it's something like, what, $20,000, Dan? So basically the question is, can we use, you know, the purchase of this other area and some other efforts that the town's undertaking, for example, even the Herring River Project's going to be restoring turtle habitat, and put that together so that we, you know, basically the state's saying you got to cough up some more money when we're already doing a whole bunch of stuff relative to turtle restoration.
Who
And
is the
somehow
agent-
the conversations are divorced.
Who is the agency requiring the mitigation? Natural Heritage?
Yeah.
So they should be able to entertain that idea if you bring to the table what you're talking about, I would think, as long as
it's enormous. What we're doing,
Right.
what the town's already doing is
Right.
enormous in terms of turtle protection.
right, right.
And it's sort of like
It's not getting counted.
Yeah, it's not. Well, I don't think either the consultants or somebody's talked to them and said,
Yeah.
"Hey, wait a second. The town's got all these other activities that are going on
Right.
that are substantially larger than what you're asking us to do for mitigation in the first place."
I would ask the question if you can offset those costs by the projects that you have planned. That's definitely an agency coordination conversation, and I would just bring it to them. And as far as the work going forward, that is total restoration. It's not mitigation for other impacts.
Well, the purchase of the Hilda Trust, for example, is permanently taking a very, very large area under municipal ownership in perpetuity.
Okay.
So yes, that's permanent restoration
Okay.
of habitat, or at least protection of habitat.
So the dredging is requiring $20,000, like actual check $20,000 to offset the mitigation for the impacts to
Yeah.
dredging.
they'll take cash.
I know they do. I know that.
They're
I'm just making sure I'm clear how the mitigation is being exchanged, but right now
Yeah.
it's just cash mitigation.
I mean, it's not big. It's just that.
It's a little
think
mafia.
the trust-
And I
I think
suppose
it's a
in
fair
fairness,
question. I think
yeah,
it's a
no,
fair
it's
question.
a very good question,
Yeah.
and I suppose in fairness to them, this occurred after some of the initial discussions, but it's very important to bring it to their attention, say, hey, you know,
Well, and also-
recent events.
Yeah, and also in terms of maintenance, I mean, this is not going to go away in terms of an issue, and it's, you know, the town's obviously doing a huge amount, you know, relative to restoration, but not getting credit for it over when it comes to dredging, and we just have to connect the dots.
It's definitely worth trying
Yeah.
Good,
to
okay.
connect the dots. I would recommend that.
Okay, then we were interested whether you had names and contact information for Massachusetts state employees who led the dredging contracts. And
Now, must be somebody up in the State Department that's the State Bureau or something that
Or
does.
let's ask a different question. It's not clear to me whose paper this would be on for us, whether it be on town paper.
It would be on town paper. Aside from the federal work, it's a town
The
contract.
last,
It could be that the state does have a division of waterways.
yeah, and I think, well, Mike has the previous documents. They weren't, it wasn't on town paper. It was-
Years ago, the Mass State Division of Waterways, now it's DCR, is Office of Waterways, partnered with a lot of the municipalities, and there would be a cost share opportunity. And back in those days, the Office of Waterways would assist the towns in the permitting, their bidding. They would oversee the construction. As far as I know, they don't do that anymore. But you could reach out to DCR to see what kind of opportunities are there. But I can give you actually a contact of the director over there if you want to reach out.
Yeah, I'd be gonna get that from you. Yeah,
I can give that to you afterwards.
that'd be good.
But
But your view is that this would be on our paper, on the
as
town
of right
paper?
now, I think if you're talking also MassWorks is your target
Yeah.
for funding as
Yeah.
well.
I was gonna say that about 20 years ago, this is how the county got the dredge. DCI walked out of the dredge business.
Okay.
And across the Commonwealth. And what they did on the Cape is they gave us $1 million to buy the dredge. That's how the whole program started. Right now, this governor recognizes the value of investing in harbors. And so the MassWorks program was created. And I'm sure you know about the MassWorks program. They'll pay up to 50% of the cost of an approved project. And that's definitely worth pursuing for you all.
Oh, yeah.
Absolutely worth pursuing.
And with that said, though, it's still a town contract and procurement process. They're
Yes.
just providing you with the dollars, and you have to provide a 50% match, but all of the contract and procurement is on the town.
And the permit's gotta be in hand.
You have to
Yeah, they're competitive too.
Very
There's a
competitive.
lot of towns along the coast of Massachusetts that want,
There are 72 coastal communities.
you can only get up to
Half
2.5
million
million
for
though, in the most, in 1 year.
Yeah, I think we're okay on 12. We kind of understand about the enterprise fund and all, so.
But our role as a county agency is to help you. And
Well, you got 15 towns too,
Yeah.
that's a big thing to try to,
So questions like this to Christine are fine. I mean,
Great,
Yeah.
great,
And-
it's great. Anyone have any other questions?
Well, just since you were saying about Christine, I wondered, you know, once we get down the road of coming up with our bid package and trying to put it all together for the subsequent 2 years projects that we do, you know, is the county available to work in partnership to help us review stuff to make sure we're asking for the right things and making the right specifications, and then once we get the bids in, it seems like there's a lot of expertise on your team that we don't necessarily have, and so is there some sort of partnership in terms of us in our bid process and review? Can the county provide that?
I think we could certainly do some things, absolutely. Some things with either are not costly too. We don't have a huge, we don't do any permitting ourselves. We hire people like Christine to help us.
So we'd have to check the scope of the contract with Bob too, because they're a contract employee of us, and I'm not sure if that's outside of their scope, of their current
Yeah.
scope, which are on
Right.
the contract, I believe, till June with us on this one, and then we're gonna go back out. So I don't know in the immediate future if that's covered in their scope. I'd have to check again just to see if it's already in there. But it's something we can look into and see if there's something we can develop, to see if we can assist you in any way in that.
Steve,
I
we
would say
need-
right now, Christine, it wouldn't be in your current scope, right?
For assistant, I'm sorry, I was just looking for contact information for you, multitasking, to put together a bid package and.
To help us as we construct our bid package, make
Yep.
sure we have everything in there that we need, and then when
Right.
we get our bids in, you know, helping us understand the value of what's being presented to us.
Yeah, if you could
Is-
be reviewed in the context of sample RFP documents that could then be tailored, obviously, for our needs, our town, our individual requirements.
Is GEI under contract to do that for you? They got your permits, so are they putting all that?
And not an RFP. That's not a task that's been given to them, to my knowledge.
Oh, okay.
I
You
mean,
really should have that. You should put that up to bid. And there's nothing that would preclude Christine from.
Either, I mean, I would assume if you're working with GEI, oftentimes that could be a contract modification, talking from the
Yeah.
private consulting world. And there's experience there. But certainly you could go out and solicit bids for those types of services. All of us that play in this kind of environment do those types of things. And
as you could be a bidder, as
for to put together basically a bid
RFP.
phase
Yeah.
process, to
Yeah.
put together the procurement packages, have the pre-bid,
Right.
review bids, make recommendation for award, all of that. Yes, you could put out an RFP for any engineering firm, not necessarily contracted, but a
Yes, yeah,
designer
understood.
contract. Yep.
But we
So
did
that's
talk to them.
above The current scope.
Yeah.
That's what I wasn't sure where your head, so that's definitely above our current scope. Yeah, that'd be another
Okay.
way to handle it.
Right.
But we did talk with
she may have been
GEI.
headed elsewhere.
Yeah.
I just kind of.
All good questions.
But we did talk to GEI about, I mean, they're obviously doing
Yes.
a lot of contracting, so they've
Yeah.
got lots of sample documents that are current with current state regulations, you know, current to what our needs are, and they were
That's
very forthcoming in terms of saying, you know, we'd be more than happy to help you guys on that.
And that helps a lot too, just as we develop a relationship with Bob and Christine, it's like the phone calls get shorter and shorter because we all know what we're talking about. You know, the first phone call's 3 hours, the next one's 5 minutes because you're already up to speed. So sometimes there's some cost savings in sticking with the people you
Right.
already know. So modification might be justified in that case. Not to take work away from your
No, I mean, honestly, we all play in a very small backyard, and,
Yeah.
and I know the guys over at GEI, and they're very capable, and they've been doing this as long as I've been doing this, so everybody has that capability, so
Yep.
you're in good hands with GEI, and you can tell. Is it Russell? Tell Russell I said that. Tell Russell I gave
There
him a
have been
plug.
conversations around the county taking over the permitting end for all the towns, but there are a lot of towns that are very, very comfortable with their own private companies, so.
Well, we're on the record, right? I'm against that.
Yeah.
They just has another pond.
Our feeling is that the towns have relationships with their contractors, and we shouldn't be getting into that. So we haven't done that.
Okay.
I know a couple of our commissioners would like us to get into that, but that's big and very expensive.
Okay.
So we're here to facilitate and assist.
Okay, last call. All right, again, thank you so much. It's been a great
welcome.
session, very helpful.
So
and,
this is contact information for DCR Waterways. I just have the main telephone number, but if you want to try to reach out to Greg, he's the director.
Is it Robbins, ONS?
Robbins, can't read my handwriting. Robbins.
INS, okay.
Yep.
Thank you.
But
I'll
again,
search-
I'm
I'll
not
search.
quite sure how much. My guess is you probably are going to look at the documents that were put up by the Office of Waterways back in the day, because I used to work there like 20 years ago, and I think that's. I know I've seen documents done for the town of Wellfleet. So those
Plenty
are.
of history there.
Yeah, there's a lot of history. So I just don't think they service that way any longer because they just don't have the in-house staff to do it.
Kevin Mooney's as well.
And Kevin's gone as well.
Yeah, no,
Yep.
no, he was the one who basically.
But I think
did
I
Wellfleet.
think he is consulting these days. If you're
Is he?
interested in hunting him down, he's out there somewhere. Yeah, exactly. It would have been Kevin, if I remember correctly. But yeah, unfortunately, DCR Waterways really isn't providing those services because of the downsizing. But MassWorks
Yeah.
is definitely the newer funding mechanism that's at the table for dredging projects. They just started the past couple of years.
And you have a lot of economic value to trade off in terms of the extra mooring, the shellfish especially,
Yeah.
from harbor. That your consultant can help weave into a MassWorks grant application. That would
That's-
help justify it.
Part of the Cape Cod Commission is looking at that.
Is that part of the Secretary of Housing and
That's right.
Economic Development?
Yeah,
Mike
Mike
Kennedy?
Kennedy. Yep.
Keneally, yeah. And then who was it?
And he's got a great staff, that work with you. So,
Yeah, they've been fabulous.
And
yeah,
then there's this Massachusetts dredging program.
that's it, yeah.
I think
That's
that's
right.
one and the same.
Yep, that's the one, yeah, that's where the application.
Yes.
yeah.
Yep.
Which Mike Flanagan, our harbor master, did a lot of work so far, but
I
It's
think
yet to be
Barnstable was
done.
getting $500,000 a year for the Sampson's Island project.
No, they lost this year.
No, they got
lost
that
it
last
this
year.
year,
I think the only requirement is you have to have all your permits in hand, which it sounds like you have. And typically they
well,
solicit in
he told
spring.
me when I talked to this gentleman who runs the program, that we could take what we have here, come March
Uh-huh.
1st out. He said they're coming out with the 2020,
Mm-hmm.
and he said you could cut and paste, stick it in there, and then add the stuff that
The
you
new
haven't
stuff.
already done.
Right. Yeah,
And then he
they-
said, make sure you get that in by the time they call for all of them, which might be April 1st,
Yeah,
or end of
There's a
March.
short-
at the advice of me, I'm like, you guys have to move that up because if people are going to go out to bid, they need to know they're getting their grant money before May. So last year, I think it was May 1st. Hopefully, they're coming out a little bit sooner. They've
Yeah.
been trying to move it up. So just keep your eye. If you go on their website, the announcement should be coming out.
So that's 2.5 million, which,
50-50, right? Yep. We just completed Hingham Harbor. They got a MassWorks grant. I think they got $2 million for that. So that was a $4 million job.
but you have to spend it within that
That fiscal
year
year.
period, yeah, fiscal
July
year.
1
Or
to
fiscal
June.
year to fiscal, you can't take it over and over.
No, no, it is a one and done. So,
Our
But it's a big
project
help.
looks like a 2-year project, probably.
so I guess you'd probably have to reapply for a second season, maybe. It's a good question for them if you reach out.
Yeah, because the
Just spend their money first.
So with that said, and maybe even before we leave, we just have the,
If you can set that up, it's a good time. Probably ideal would be at the beginning.
I'd like to get copies of this, or maybe we can scan it down after the meeting.
From there,
Yep. Scan, well, let's just set it here and for things that we'll scan so we get out.
Easy enough.
Yeah, okay, right, effective.
Here's packets of handout, which includes the action item list. You may have already brought them with you, but,
Okay, there's some there.
yeah. So let's just quickly go through the detailed agenda.
Okay, yeah.
And the item on that, I tell you what, let's do updates and new discussion, because that may spawn new stuff for the action item list, and I can update that after we have it. In this packet, under updates 4A, we talked about permits and a list of permits, and we got the information from GEI. And I figured I'd put it in an Excel spreadsheet, which is one of the handouts here in this packet. And I figured we should track stuff there where we need to review it, not now, but I want to keep track of any expiration dates. We had that little issue about,
Conscom.
yeah, conscom, so keep track of that. So at your leisure, read through this, send me any comments you have, questions or comments for that. And under, I haven't filled this in yet, but applicable to, I added that column so that we can define if it's applicable to the channel dredging, or dredging, or both. And the conscom supposedly not applicable to the channel dredging. So the intent of this document is just to track stuff so we don't lose the clock on any of it. And also, if it raises any questions that we need to run down, we can capture them here as well. Probably enough said for that. Comments to permits. Kurt, you had some very insightful comments, very good comments.
Did you print, I don't have the email with me.
No, I put them in a list, but maybe
And I
I
didn't bring my computer either.
Kurt had comments.
These are your lists.
Contingency.
Here's a pile you got under here.
I think that's duplicates.
It's not in this.
Yeah, no, I have the document, but I don't think I included it. Yes, I should have.
I have a question for Dan. Maybe. We heard about the piggybacking onto the core. What we're considering the north anchorage, is that something we are going to work at, even as a piggyback onto that, even if it fails, being, weather or whatever, so that, we have money in hand, do we? How do we? So that if by some chance everything goes real well, and they have an extra week or whatever it would take to dredge that area, are we gonna be able to do that? Does GEI have to file for that? I don't understand. It's kinda like we're asking for a job that may not be able to be done.
Yeah, yeah.
But we need to know that the job could be done
Yeah.
if it fits the window.
I would talk to Mike Flanagan when he's back on
Okay.
that one.
All right.
Yeah, it'd be a shame to have everything go well and we're sitting there saying coulda, shoulda, woulda.
Yep.
I would rather we went through the resource of getting this ready
You're right.
and then failed because of the dredge window closing up or something of that nature. But I wouldn't want us to be saying there at the end and they're like, well, Jesus, you didn't get your paperwork in. Or something, I don't know what.
That gives us something more to the whole picture sooner.
Correct.
If we could use that time. We don't know, but we are not ready. It's the same as getting some money from the state.
Right.
Another $2.5 million.
But my
We
question,
might not get picked.
my question is, the amount of yardage is in
That
there,
was the,
where would we get the money out of
I haven't
cycle
done a detailed analysis.
to do
of the-
this?
The other thing I can think of at this time is the $7.5 million that was approved by town meeting,
Okay.
because it'll be tough to get money from the state, Because we don't know whether we're gonna be able to use it in the fiscal year in which we're asking for.
No, it's what, this is kind of the chicken and the egg deal.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, but we need both.
Yep, yep.
So
You
I
mean,
mean,
like, you wanna know if we can draw on it, write a check
well,
on it?
my question is, we can't put this out to bid unless we can fund it.
Right.
So this would be going out to bid as a possible add-on, because we don't know whether or not it can happen because of the dredge time. And the Corps is not going to say this can happen because they're gonna make sure their project gets done. If there's extra time for the contractor, after the contractor has met the Corps' requirements, we may have the luxury of using them. That would be the only way this would work, in my opinion. So it's whether or not we have the paperwork in to be able to do this, the finances to do this, as a maybe. I mean, we're putting it, but without this maybe, we're basically having the federal government come in and dredge with no way to get to it. So, you know, that was the safety part of this. But the North Anchorage, my question is, A, what would it cost to dredge? You know, I mean, ballpark, where would the town fund that? Can our engineer make sure that we get that in an RFP out to bid on through discussions with the Corps to make sure that we're not stepping on their toes, to ask them how to do it properly, to make sure that all this floats, or flows, I should say, together, so that if there is a window of time left over for the contractor, and yes, we would probably be paying for it, but if we can skip the mob and the demob, that could be our portion of the 50%, sort of speaking. I mean, you know, we are spending our money, but if we can save that part of it, it might be the same as a reimbursement for doing it later.
Yep.
But how do you access the actual 7.5 million, or any portion of it? I mean,
That's not an issue, so that will
you can
be-
just like write a check if
that
we
will
had
be
a,
Well, if we decided that we were going to do it, we would contract out, we would start spending the money, we would borrow the bond as we spent the money. So that part of it is not an issue. If the committee decides that we're going to be using that part of that $7.5 million, then that's what we would do. That's not an issue, so.
sounds like that's,
No, I mean, it's something that we would have to start on, with the Corps. I shouldn't say that. I think we need guidance from the Corps,
Yeah.
not to make a mess out of the Corps' project.
Yep.
yeah, that's, so somewhere we should set in a schedule where we're gonna see,
Could we
is
work
it
through our engineer?
up
Yes,
in Concord,
so my
is it
question to
for-
Dan was,
Craig?
who should, I mean, my question, I guess, was, we understand how this could work, in theory. So Mike would be the one to probably contact our engineer.
Yeah, Mike has already talked to Craig, or he called Craig Martin in late January, and he's waiting a response back from Craig. So Mike can follow up with Craig and our engineer to get the ball rolling.
So we can use them to get this rolling. We don't have to put it out to anyone else. We can just go right with the people that we're using.
I think so, with GEI.
Well, I mean, I was trying to get all the pieces on
Yeah,
all the puzzle
I think we
pieces.
need a meeting with Craig for any number of reasons, now that the work plan is there, and this would be a primary, so much like we did today with these guys, I think we need to put together a list of what we want to talk to Craig about.
Okay,
This
but
would certainly be on that
because I
list.
think the town itself, the fact that we have the money, in theory, we can do this. I mean, it's not like we're looking for budgeting, that's
Right.
there.
It's there.
No, the only issue was the one that Christine raised about if there are any procurement concerns, Dan. And that was about it.
Yeah, we should talk to the town lawyer, it said. to
Yeah,
see
just
if
just as far as, you know, otherwise it's, you know, there's an option
Yes.
within the core contract that would include this component. That way everybody's noticed, the permits are in hand, and then
So
if there are any procurement issues, we can.
We can deal with
Send
it.
it out to the same people, but yeah.
Yeah, and if the window's there, then we should be able to do it.
Yes, I think that would be huge if we could do that.
All right, so comments to permits, I apologize, I didn't include that in the distribution, so I'll send it out. I just need to resurrect it, I probably opened it on my laptop and I'm not.
I'm sorry I'm not following your exact list.
No, it's just, I had a whole bunch of comments relative to the permits, but we can go,
Yeah.
it's detailed,
Yeah.
detailed comments, but
And what we do is,
that another time.
I'll issue it, and then we need to look at who needs to follow up on it. We can put them on the action item list and assign them accordingly. Contact list is just ongoing. If there's anyone else that needs to be added, just let me know. The last submittal didn't have any updates. It's fairly mature. The harbor survey and the report from GEI was in fact issued, and people have copies of it, electronic copies of it. He did promise, Dan Robbins promised, that he would do a memo about the quantities with a comparison to the last survey, which I guess was several years ago.
Do you know, Chris, if they did contact Provincetown Center for Coastal Studies? Because those folks actually had done a full I'll never pronounce that right, Bithrythmic survey, I think 2 years ago.
No, I thought it was longer than that back.
No, there was one before that.
But the center just recently issued it.
The center had just done one
Yeah.
within the last 3 years.
Oh, so then they could compare
That's newer.
that 3 years to this.
So there's three.
Yeah.
There should be 3 surveys: the original survey, PCCS's, and then the one that GEI just did.
Right. And they give them a comfortable feeling for an estimate of how much more
Yeah,
is done.
because that would help us estimate. It would give us an idea of whether the siltation rate is increasing or decreasing, or staying, consistent.
Well,
Which is
there's
really
just
helpful.
as many power plants around and just as many autos and airplanes flying, so the carbon's coming down.
I'll follow up. I know GEI was going to reach out. Maybe they did, but I don't have confirmation if they received it, so
Okay.
I'll take that as a follow-up. Cost estimates, we're chipping away at that. The cost per cubic yard that we got today was helpful
Yeah,
information.
at least we had one number.
If we get to vote, let's vote on the 40 instead of the 60. In conjunction with that, though, we're also, I had taken the information that Dennis had on the purchase of scows and equipment. I need to populate that some more. Dennis actually sent me an email reminding me that if we're going to do that, we should add a line for debt service and also maintenance dredging. So that's an ongoing task. Draft maintenance dredging plan, GEI, had promised it at the end of the month, so I'll give them a reminder, just to keep them focused. And then Kurt, once you get that, you'll add your sustainable mitigation actions. H, Conservation Commission. In reading through this, there's a lot of things. This was issued in 2017, and there were some issues that said, the town needs to do this and that. At the time, it read within 60 days or 90 days, if I'm remembering right. We should go through this order of conditions and see what still needs to be satisfied. So,
Where would we find those orders of condition? Is that a document of the town of Wellfleet?
it is.
Do we go to the?
It's in the permit. It's in this.
Oh, it's
I
in
think
one
one
of
of the
those
scanned
permits?
documents that Dan Hort sent us.
So that's in one of the permits.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'd still be interested. I'll follow up with Mike Flanagan about getting the Army Corps standard RFP documents. Although it sounds like pretty soon we better be able to see the real one if they stay on a timeline like Christine described. Okay, work plan we talked about. Contingency planning list. I can reissue that so that we keep it as a running list on what our concerns are. And then some grant opportunities. Skip, you had a conversation with, much like we had at the end here.
Right, and what they're saying is, yes, this whole organization was moved over to a kind of a department of the Massachusetts government. It's called Mass Dredging Program. But I would go with Alfred's thing first, is figure out how we can put together the data for the going to pitch with the Corps of Engineers, where we could tie on to their contract vendors. But at the same time, we do have the information in the 2019 Massachusetts Dredging Program that Mike Flanagan did, And as I said, you can take that and cut and paste to when another couple of weeks the 2020 grant application will be out. And we could actually fill in the blanks of that using help from GEI. And then we can throw that in and compete with others, or decide that we'll just keep that on hold until we use some of that $7.5 million and put our efforts on this on the back burner to another 2021 or 2022.
Can you shepherd that with DEI so that we
Okay.
keep them focused, if you would contact them and working with them, and of course with Mike Flanagan. And if you would make sure everyone's aware, everyone, especially GEI, or including GEI, what the timeline needs to be. And I guess step one is confirming and getting the 2020 form.
It's getting complete. There's 17 pages, so
Is the form out though for 2020?
not yet.
Okay.
This is the form.
Something was
Mike was
estimating the siltation.
already done work on that.
But it's a 2019 one, right?
Right,
Yeah, so,
2019.
sure. Okay, well, I would hope GEI knows when the 2020.
They said they were new about it, and everything,
Yeah.
so need to contact them.
Okay, so if you would take that one on.
There's one other item there, Dan. If we could get Provincetown Center for Coastal Studies to do an analysis of the black mayo, the nitrogen content, and I don't know what it would cost, but if we can find out the nitrogen content of that material, we could potentially apply to some other sources for grant funding.
Is it primarily or exclusively the nitrogen content that we need now? If they're gonna do an analysis, should we ask for other constituents, or?
Look at the analysis that's already been done on it. They don't list it.
They don't. There's not a nitrogen analysis. They do. They look for heavy metals. They look for.
VOCs.
Yeah, they look for all kinds of other stuff, but they don't typically do nitrogen because
They
it's
haven't done it.
no, because nitrogen's not an element of concern
For the dredge, for the dredge.
for the dredge. But as far as wastewater, every cubic yard of sediment that we're pulling out that contains nitrogen is a
So
nitrogen
wastewater
credit to the
committee or anything
town.
like that's never done that kind of stuff.
No, that's why I'm on the wastewater committee. That's why I'm asking.
Oh.
Nobody's ever done an analysis of the sediments, but
You think
if we
CCS are the right people?
well,
Or-
CCS did the nitrogen analysis of where the nitrogen came from, so the origins, but they didn't actually do one of the nitrogen content. And once we know the nitrogen content, then we can estimate how much we're taking out of the harbor, and
Sure.
that's a credit. So
And how would they express that, in what units? As
it'd be so much nitrogen per cubic yard, because we have cubic yards for what we're removing.
Yeah, okay.
But is that something, Dan, that we could?
I can check with them.
Okay. New discussion items, we had talked about town regulations, making sure we don't get tripped up in anything like a noise or work hour regulation. Didn't sound like there were any impediments to it. I don't know if anyone made a definitive statement, though, that there is no noise restrictions. Who within the town can confirm that?
The town has a noise bylaw, so it depends on when the dredging would occur. If they're like farmers and sometimes they're gonna work through the night,
Yeah.
there might be an issue with the noise bylaw.
So they're gonna work through the night.
Yeah, that we know.
Okay.
I mean, I shouldn't say that. The past times, they worked through the night. The only thing that they did the last time was instead of blowing a whistle, they did something different for moving the thing. They kind of caved in a little bit to make sure it was more. That thing's gonna work around, I didn't say that correctly. Depending on when the tide is there,
Yeah.
is when they're gonna work. The weather window, the tide, it's not gonna be whether it's light or dark. That's gonna be, whenever they can keep moving.
Yep.
Okay, then we talked about B&C staging plan and then facilities provided by town, if any. That should be you and Mike Flanagan in terms of whether we're gonna give the contractors any space on the pier stockpile, or, you know, think about what the rules of the road would be for that, if they, as they stage their material, even if
Pretty
it's-
much at this point, whatever they need to get the job done.
Yeah.
It's gonna happen, so.
But we should be thinking in our minds, okay, where will that area be? And, you know,
They could
what's-
take up the entire pier if they want.
Okay.
They won't take up much space though.
No, I wouldn't think.
90% of the stuff's gonna be on the scow automatically, on the crane barge.
Yeah. Monitoring plan during dredging, we had talked about, one of the things would be, well, this is probably where we raised the issue about the nitrogen credits, though. The H&S plan, it sounds like it is normal for the contractor to have then appropriate environmental health and safety plan, insurance, indemnification. If the harbor basin dredging's on town paper, who's our go-to person on that? Town council for things like insurance and indemnification?
Mm-hmm.
And who is town council?
KP Law.
Oh, it's
Once we're ready to do the
outsourced?
contract, that's.
Outsourced?
I'm sorry?
Town council is whom?
Is a law firm called KP Law.
Yeah, okay. And that's who we go to an outside council. We don't have in-house.
That is correct.
Okay. All right, anything else we need to talk about before we go to the action item list, which we've probably covered, but we'll take a quick look at it. Somewhere, I think I included it here. Stuff, new stuff since the last meeting is in red.
Yeah, I got it.
You got it, you got it, you guys got it, Alfred, you have it? So what I try and do is, the old stuff, even though it may still be open items, I'll change it to black and put the new stuff in red, but,
Survey was done, right?
yeah. Yep, so, I think what I kept it open and the row is too nice, I said we got the memo to follow is why I kept it open. Standard documents we talked about, draft maintenance dredging plan, well, I'll push GDI, make sure that they know the end of February is when it was promised for. Mitigation items, we get the draft, you'll do your thing, Kurt. Estimate efforts with town accountant, this is more for to try and take a swag at if we bought our own equipment and did our own labor, just as a parallel check estimate, in conjunction with getting bids. Conservation, okay, there's the order of conditions, and we said we need to review that. The meeting, good meeting, I'm glad you arranged that, Skip, I thought today was very helpful. Then last meeting, we talked about Mayo Creek, including removal of the duckbill, and what kind of, what the requirements would be to go ahead and do just the removal of the duckbill.
Well, it's, I'm laughing because it's, the Mayo Creek Task Force provided a fairly lengthy report to the Board of Selectmen that they accepted,
Right.
which recommended that the town pursue the idea of restoring Mayo Creek. And, you know, that's just, it's a potential marsh restoration project, not unlike the Herring River. It's very complex to get the permitting for that. But keeping it on here at least keeps some visibility on the fact that that project impacts the dredge maintenance effort going forward.
Right.
So to the extent that we don't do something there in terms of the restoration, it's going to have a negative impact on the costs of maintenance dredging. The other thing is there was a report recently done by Agnes Mittermeier from the Provincetown Center for Coastal Studies, which was very interesting, and it showed that the black mayo, one of the big constituents of the black mayo, is Phragmites, which is the freshwater marsh grass.
Mm-hmm.
and there was not very much, if any, of the salt marsh grass in that. But roughly about a third of it was Phragmites. So, it's another argument to be made in terms of restoring the salt marsh environment, in terms of having reducing the amount of black mayo in the harbor, which is ultimately where the sedimentation is coming from. So, there's not much more to say on that. I mean, the doing that restoration is its own track.
But pulling off the duckbill, we can't even do that right now, or it's.
I think there needs to be some continuing discussions with probably Hillary and some other folks relative to and Dan and town council with regard to what the impact to the town could be if that was the just pulling it off or just doing some test work could bring us into legal conflict with the Harborside Village.
Yeah.
And some of the other abutters in there. Alfred's in a butter. But, that's really the question, is what's the potential impact if just the duckbill is pulled off?
What's your view of it? What do you think the impact would be? I mean, specific to yourself and that property?
I believe it's gonna make all the septic systems non-compliant
Okay.
because of the raise of the water level.
Okay.
When the clapper failed before, we have water tests as far as at ground elevation that show that.
Okay, so it's a legitimate concern.
And the other thing is, this isn't the same as the Herring River, because 90% of Mayo Creek is owned by people, not the seashore. So you're flooding private property,
Okay.
which the dike created the property. I mean, I'm not gonna say, but. We'll stop it. My understanding is the town has allowed it to go on as a study as long as it didn't cost the town any money. Is that correct?
Well, I think the Board of Selectmen approved going forward with the restoration. I mean, that was the vote of the Board of Selectmen. But
Details to follow, it sounds
Yeah.
like in. Okay.
I wonder if we should be taking any of our efforts on that at this point, if we were doing a Gantt chart.
Yeah.
And how important is that towards these other things that are much more complex and lack of controls?
no, we can't.
climate.
I don't think we should be engaged in it at all, except that it's a cost impact to the project.
Two things. I can close it out and say it's under the purview of. Is the Mayo Creek Commission still intact?
Yeah.
No, they disbanded after they provided their report.
Well, I can put it to a lower section that says this primarily affects maintenance dredging, or the benefit would be to that, and so,
Yeah, I'd
we
say
don't get
like-
distracted by it all.
Yeah,
every
I would
time.
say the benefit to it, but
Yeah.
the more benefit is getting the feds going and
Yeah.
negotiating with the feds if they'll let us use their dredge company.
And likewise, the next item, which is, we had touched briefly on alternate dredging technique. Now, I've kind of gotten two impressions, maybe I've heard it, maybe I've dreamed it. Are permits preclude any and all hydraulic dredging, or was it just deemed not to be practical? Because in the last conversation, we talked about maybe around the perimeter of the basin, it may be an appropriate technique. But does anyone know for sure the permits precluded?
I believe that was stated in it, but I could be wrong.
Yeah, that was the
Because
impression.
we have no onshore disposal area.
I mean, what are you gonna do with everything?
Okay, so maybe this gets traction only in conjunction with restoration, which is.
Yeah, if you could use the
All put down
spoils,
the
if the
triage
spoils could be
ladder.
used, if the spoils could be used for either the Herring River project or a potential Mayo Creek project, then you could pump that, you could hydraulically dredge it.
Okay, so this
So-
kind of gets.
As long as someone was willing to bring in a machine for a portion of the project.
Yeah.
And then
Yeah,
we're
it's-
talking
it's-
pumps, and pumps have problems.
Well, if it's Mayo Creek, it wouldn't, that's very close by.
Number 12 is one, and I haven't gotten an update from either Mike or Nancy. They were going to take a
We
look at
discussed
this,
it with Nancy, it's a moot point.
so I can close it?
Yep.
Can I close it with a comment that says what, it's moot, or we're going to do something, or
Nothing, we're not gonna do anything.
no action required?
Yep.
Okay, 13 is as we go through the permits, the scanned documents that Dan provided, we need to keep track of what we as a town need to do. Again, some of the conditions. 14, I think, has been satisfied by virtue of what Dan, you sent out, the work plan and the approval of the budget and all. I'm not aware of any other federal permits that are required. Does the Corps come with their own permits, or because they're the Corps, they don't need them?
No, they had to get their permits.
Okay.
Yeah, because of the
That's what
endangered
heritage.
species.
Yeah.
and so
Are
that's-
there
that's another-
are there permits that the Corps got that is not on my permit list? I didn't have any details, so I just put a placeholder in. I called it reference number 101, U.S. Army Corps of Engineers.
In our packet, the packet included the permits for all phases of the project.
When you say packet,
Who sent out the packet?
The
This is
scan
the
one came
this is
from
the
Dan Hort.
yeah this is the one that Dan sent out. So
yeah,
that was
there were
comprehensive.
4 documents.
So in the documents, the documents included both the federal project and then areas 1 and 2.
But I didn't. I took those, unless I missed it. I didn't see anything specific to or from or about the Corps. These things were all, the E and F and all. If there's something else there, I'd like to add it so we keep track of it. No action required, but just so we're aware. If you see that, if there's anything that we can flesh out there, or if it's subsumed by all the permits listed below, that's okay. It just wasn't clear to me if that was the case.
Yeah, no, I think this is comprehensive.
Okay.
So what you have is all the permits that are
Yeah.
required and the status of each. So there's nothing else additional.
Okay, then 15 is to develop the timeline and the required events for state funds. And who and how best to do that?
I mean, one big thing is where's Mike Flanagan on, and working with GEI, because he was working with himself and GEI to make this document up already.
Oh, you're talking about that one?
That's when you're talking
Yeah,
about.
but my question
Is that the right
is,
one?
are there any other documents or that we have to do?
Oh, for funding?
For funding, for state funding. We have to do the draft
Oh,
maintenance plan.
the other piece was with the 2 representatives, Sear,
Yeah.
and that was earmarks. So that's where they try to put a tag on top of the some other bill that ties into so much dollars for Wellfleet to do dredging. It's called an earmark.
They're illegal now.
Yeah, well, that's because that's when this came about. They try to
Yeah.
erase.
They
Because
can't do earmarks anymore. But
Well, then with Sarah Peak, that's
Yeah,
what she involved in. She came down to the harbor when we were talking to the.
yeah, they're like, for example, Mass Works, being one of there are various pots of money within the state that they can help us access.
So that's more than just this. I mean, we can do this without her.
Well,
Well, this is a grant program, right? Is that the 2.5?
Yeah, that's up to 2.5 million.
But
The maximum grant's up to 2.5.
I believe that's different from the 100% match.
Yeah.
Whereby they would fund 50%, 100% match. You'd be us and the state. That's a different.
The thing I thought was, and that was more of a political thing. Why would Sarah Peak be involved? This one we can do without her because you fill out the application, you put it in the pot, and they decide who
that's
gets it.
not the. Let's call it $15 million. Half of that is 7.5.
No.
That's different funding. That's the
You
state
got it.
match, and that's the part that I'm trying to get a handle on. What has to happen in order for us to get our match?
Good question.
Who has to do what and when? And so,
We,
who's knowledgeable that we can reach out to and say, hey, we
Didn't the guy from GEI say that they help people do that?
Yep. He said that for grants. I'll follow up with GEI. And then I feel like we need to coordinate it with.
That was with this office here. That's when we had that visit. I've called this guy 4 times and I don't know how else to get through to him.
Okay, so I can start with chasing GEI,
Yeah,
but then also I feel like we need to keep
you know,
the
where you could get,
politicians in the loop.
yeah, that would be to talk to Sarah
Yeah.
Peak.
Okay.
You must be able to get that on the internet from our,
Yeah.
from Massachusetts legislature.
Okay.
And she wouldn't have been there if she wasn't thinking that we could find a way to get money.
Mhm. Yeah, it's just there's a number of ways to get that funding. There's 2 pieces to it. One is what the state ordinarily provides and makes available for these projects, and then there are a variety of other sources that may or may not be applicable to a dredge project. So it's a mix of existing state channels and other grant sources. So
In a perfect world, GEI will know this.
and GEI is regularly submitting the paperwork for all of those. So
Okay.
Yeah, this says the Massachusetts Dredging Program is open to the Commonwealth, 78 coastal communities, and funding through the Massachusetts Dredging Program is available for saltwater dredging of public tidelands and associated disposal of dredged material. Grant rounds typically open in spring. Allowable costs include the bidding and construction of eligible dredging projects.
So GEI has the experience in this, so we can rely on them, I think, to help us wade through this.
Right. So we got to get them back on this table here to
Yeah. Okay.
discuss with them. What are they doing? What have they done since they came down to us in January, and we haven't heard a peep.
Well, I'm not sure that we've hired them to look for grant funding, so.
Yeah.
Well, he kind of portrayed that as, that's just something we do.
Yeah, we talked about kind of,
Right.
he does it knowing he's gonna get the full business, or.
All right, any other items, the stuff off the other list, the appropriate ones I'll add to this list and we'll keep track and try and keep everyone, including ourselves, focused on it. I think that's it. Anybody have any other items?
you had this review status of sand migration in Indiana.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, that was a question that came up out of the FinCom, and it really has nothing to do with dredging, certainly not blackmail. It was portrayed as sand, and it was kind of in the context of, gee, can't you just send a front-end loader out there and move it back? So I don't think it's going to get traction, certainly within the purview of dredging, but I was going to follow up with, I think Mike Flanagan is aware of what the guy was referring to.
Yeah, it would be an ongoing maintenance plan.
But it's really not part of this.
No.
I believe Hillary's also looking at a beach nourishment thing that
Yeah.
takes all of it into consideration.
Oh,
You could ask her.
okay. Good suggestion, thank you. Okay, anything else?
Not from us.
Next meeting. We were kind of headed to a 2-week cycle. This one was 3 weeks because of schedule conflicts. How do people feel about 2 weeks?
I think the next meeting, don't we want to plan around getting Craig?
Yeah.
So we should maybe see what his schedule looks like and then plan accordingly within the next.
Yeah.
'Cause he would be the next-
He would be a major component,
he's-
like these guys were
Exactly, so
today.
when he can come in, then
Okay, well, let's do this. Are people good for the 26th, tentatively on the 26th? And we'll float that out there with Craig. And I don't know, do people envision that he would come here, or are we playing an away game?
Well, it depends on how timely we want to get going on this project.
Well, we
If
know
he
the
says
answer
he
to that. That's a
can't come
rhetorical
down here
question.
until the
Yeah.
middle of March, then I'd get in bus, we have them over at the COA and,
Yeah,
They've
Go
been
up
here
there.
a couple of times.
yeah,
Yeah.
okay.
so.
I won't be here from the 26th to the 6th.
I won't be around from the 27th till about then either.
Okay,
And
we'll-
26th, there is Hillary's grant, coastal zone meetings on the 26th as well, but that'd be only till 3.
But do we want to entertain like the 25th, or is there, tell you what, Will, you're gonna see Mike tomorrow?
Yeah, you can contact them.
Yeah.
Do we know what Dennis's schedule is?
Tell him,
He's not gonna be around for,
he said a couple of months.
Okay, I
till, he made it sound like maybe June.
I thought sooner,
I didn't bump into him before he
Would it
Yeah,
be more
he's-
helpful to contact Craig Martin and figure out what he can do
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah,
than set a meeting over email? Or?
Yeah, if he said he was coming next week, maybe do it next week. I mean, it's,
so,
I'm available other than those things. I mean, if a meeting comes up to meet with Craig, I'd be more than happy to accommodate that, but those 10 days I won't be here.
26th to the 6th, did you say?
Yes.
so before the 26th.
Yeah. So, Will, would you ask Mike to
Maybe
call
next week.
Craig? Yeah, let's say next week.
I'll find out when he's available.
Yeah, do that and then circle back. and let
Keep in
everybody
mind,
know.
next week is also school vacation, so I don't know his status with that either. So,
Let's go for next week and then we'll.
like I said, I'll call him and
Yeah.
see what he wants to do.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Anything else? Motion to adjourn?
Second.
So,
All right, thank you.